This is Jocko Podcast number 152 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
These are men that would rather die than live with the shame that they didn't offer their last breath in service to the men to their left and to their right in battle. Each man was shaped through immense trials, personal fortitude, and dedication, giving all he had to offer. At times, when only the great pride of walking in the path least traveled was there to keep him company. Through constant discipline, drive, and sacrifice, they have risen to the top of their trade and embodied the ethos of the Marine Raider. A man who displays the very pinnacle of soldiery virtue and unwavering loyalty. A man who will never quit or surrender and who will at all times stand ready to sacrifice whatever is needed to accomplish the mission. They stand as shining examples of what our nation entrusts its freedom and respect to. Nothing is more awe-inspiring than the look on a fellow operator's face as they are surrounded by death. The casual smile of confidence as they acknowledge that things will be what they'll be. And if this is the way we die, then let's do it right and honor our legacy. When surrounded on all sides, we faced what seemed the inevitability of death. Not a man before you skipped a beat in their commitment. All or nothing. Death or glory. And those are some excerpts from a speech by Marine Raider Gunnery Sergeant Brian C. Jacklin, talking about a mission that he was on. And I think in that speech he did a great job of explaining the type of man that makes up the Marine Raiders, which is the Marine Corps component of Special Operations. And tonight, we are lucky enough to be sitting with one of those men, a United States Marine, a Special Operations Raider, and a true hero, Derek Herrera. Derek, welcome, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you on here, man. I know we got hooked up through some old mutual friends, and I'm glad we did, and I'm glad to sit down and be able to talk to you and hear a little bit about you and your life and everything that you've done. And as usual, let's start in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Which is where you were born, right?
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And what was the family doing in Little Rock, Arkansas?
My father was a pilot in the Air Force.
Okay.
And so he was stationed there, and I was born there in 1984.
And then how long were you guys moving around all the time? Typical military family?
Yes, absolutely. So moved about every 2 or 3 years. So I lived in Arkansas for about 2 years, moved to Illinois, I think, for a year or two, and then Honduras for an overseas assignment to Tegucigalpa, Honduras in the late 80s, which was pretty interesting.
Do you speak Spanish then?
No, I did for a while, and then tried to replace it with Arabic and then Pashto, and I learned that that's not one of my gifts.
Let's just go with English and get a terp.
Exactly. So knew enough to be tactically conversant, But no, so lived there for a few years, and then my dad moved to Dover, Delaware, was stationed at Dover Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. He was a C-130 and C-5 pilot, and continued to bounce around. But at that time in elementary school, my parents had divorced, so my family still lives in Delaware today. Also had the opportunity to live in Colorado and a few other places. But
at what age were you when you got sort of like the military bug in your head?
it was always a family business. So my grandfathers were both in the Air Force for 25 years and 28 years, respectively. They were enlisted in the Air Force. And my father was in the Air Force for 22 years in active duty.
How did you not get bit by the Air Force bug?
It was interesting. So going through high school, I'd always knew I'd wanted to serve in the military, and started to get interested in the Surface Academy option as well. So when I lived in Colorado, actually, I lived with my dad when he was stationed at the Air Force Academy. So we lived on the Air Force Academy when I was there for 7th and 8th grade, and just always was drawn to that line of work.
Yeah.
And decided
the Air Force Academy that's a nice environment.
It's really nice.
It's a really nice environment. It's beautiful campus, and and your dad was working there, and that was that not? I mean, when you say you were thinking about the military academies, were you thinking of the Air Force Academy as your primary, or?
No. So after that experience, in 9th grade, I moved back and lived with my mom in high school in Delaware, and my senior year of high school. Had been playing lacrosse up to that point, and had the opportunity to go and play for Navy, or try to walk on at least, and had a decent relationship with the coaches there. And so I was applying to Navy and Air Force, and also wanted to be a Navy SEAL, actually. And so at that time, I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. And so as soon as I got in and got accepted there, stopped applying to other places and just decided to go there.
Yeah, right on. Did you visit the Naval Academy? Did you know what was going on at the Naval Academy?
I thought I did.
The only reason I asked that is because, I know I was not the most squared away kid. I was kind of a rebellious kid. And even though I loved the military, I think if I would have gone to, and I went to West Point when I was a little kid, and that kind of got me fired up.
Yeah.
I think my dad took me to some kind of game there. I was really young, like maybe 7 or 8 or something like that. But it was enough to make me go, yeah, But I think if I saw it when I was a little bit older, I don't know. I think I would have just said, I don't know if I can put up with all that right now.
Yeah.
But you did. You were like, I'm bring it.
Any 17-year-old young man doesn't always have all the right motivations. And, you have all the reasons why you go to a place like that. And what I found after I had gone there was that those reasons change once you're there. And so I entered in 2002, shortly after September 11th. It wasn't solely out of patriotic duty and and those sorts of things. It was because, I had already gotten in. I'd wanted to play lacrosse there. I was in love with my high school sweetheart from Delaware, who's now still my wife of almost 13 years. And so those were the reasons why I'd initially, decided to go there.
How did that play? How did you having your high school sweetheart, how did that play into want to go to the Naval Academy? Because you would be close by?
Yeah, it was about an hour drive away.
Got it.
So she could come and see me on the weekends and that kind of stuff. And so those were some of the initial reasons why I went there, in addition to all the patriotic reasons as well. But what I found when I was there, and you're challenged and you're tested, is those smaller superficial motivators often fade away, right? And what you're left with is those reasons why I initially went here aren't going to continue to propel me through the rest of this trial, right? And so the motivation and the things that I learned from there at that point was the seniors that we had watched and were led by, who had just graduated, were literally going forward and leading Marines and sailors in battle. And we literally watched that on television with the invasion of Iraq and the things going on in Afghanistan, and really bought into the entire leadership philosophy and wanted to be a part of that and wanted to be that and follow that example. So those were the reasons why I tried to stay and continue to move forward and become a military officer.
Lately I've been apologizing to people because there's actually been a pretty decent number of people that have joined the military because of listening to, all of us and the guys that bring on here talk about their experiences, and they just think that sounds pretty cool. And I always say, hey, just don't be mad at me. Like the first 2 weeks that you're going through boot camp or whatever, don't be mad at, because it's going to be a shock to your system when you lose all that freedom that you've had. But I totally agree with you in the fact that once you get through that initial shock and you realize that there's a long-term thing going on here and you want to be a part of it, that's awesome. And especially for you guys that came in after September 11th, because I don't know if people can appreciate that, what the difference is between the September 11th and post September 11th. I mean, pre September 11th, there was almost, in fact, my first deployment to Iraq, my SEAL platoon had zero combat experience. Zero. So no one had any combat experience at all. The most things that anyone had done at that point was doing shipboardings in the Persian Gulf, which is not combat experience. It's just a fairly administrative operation. And now every single guy in the SEAL teams has combat experience. Every single guy. Well, I mean, barring maybe a few outliers, but basically every single guy. The Marine Corps, look at the Marine Corps right now. I mean, it's been what, 17 years of fighting, and the combat experience is just so incredible compared to prior to September 11th, which it was totally rare to have somebody at a SEAL team that was in the first Gulf War, that was in one of the 3 platoons that got to do something. And what they did, God bless them, they were doing their duty, but it wasn't these big, long, sustained combat operations.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I think that's something that, I think about a lot today, especially when we talk about millennials and everything else, and they get a bad rap, but everybody knows what they're joining the military to do. And some men and women run to the sound of the gun, right? And some don't. And so the people that continue to stay in, there was no question of what you were doing if you signed up to join the Marine Corps or the SEALs, right?
And then how did that selection process, you said you wanted to possibly go in the SEAL teams. How did that work out that you didn't go in the SEAL teams? And that's got to be a tough decision to make.
Yeah. And sometimes it's made for you, right? So Naval Academy is a very, very humbling experience. And so as I came out of high school, I was kind of a very talented young athlete, and was able to get in, but I was also from a small town, and didn't have the humility and ownership needed to be a part of the teams, and that became readily apparent. I was physically capable, but just wasn't mature enough, honestly, and wasn't didn't have that right mindset. So I was thoroughly humbled, and then as I was kind of coming to the realization of what I wanted to do with my life, what now, had a mentor of mine who I really respected, who was a Marine Major, and said, Derek, I can help you try to get in the Marine Corps if you're still willing to do that, and that's what you want to do. I think you'd make a great officer, and the Marine Corps that you see at the Naval Academy is not what is the reality, right, of what the fleet does, because I had a really bad taste for Marines there, because all the Marines there were drill instructors, and it was their job to mess with you, and so I was like, man, Marines are dumb. I don't want to be like that. But the more I got to know the reality of what it was like in the fleet and what real Marines were doing, I decided to pursue it and absolutely loved it. It was the best thing for me.
And so then you go from there from the academy, you go to the basic school?
Correct, yeah. So we go to the basic school. We go for the 6 months of the basic school, and with every Marine officer. So every Marine officer, ground, air, everybody goes through that same process. And then during that time, there's another selection. And so, literally rank every choice you have from, tanks, supply, logistics, finance, add 1 through 21 if you're a ground officer, or if you're a pilot, obviously you have a flight contract, you don't have to do that. But you rank it, and then they do a quality spread to determine what you get. And so in some cases, pre 9/11, like you said, it was really hard and competitive to become an infantry officer. And then when we were there, it was still pretty competitive until about halfway through the course, like a month out from the end of the course, because manpower came down and was like, we're standing up a new infantry regiment. So
boom.
Yeah, and so I think I would have gotten infantry regardless, but either way, got what I wanted. It was my first choice, and that's exactly what I wanted to do and move forward.
And then where'd you go from there? So
you stay in Quantico for a 3-month course called Infantry Officers Course.
Get some.
And it's amazing. Yeah. One of the best training experiences there are. And so you learn weapon systems, you learn, all different kinds of basic small unit tactics, everything you need to be able to lead a rifle platoon in an infantry battalion. Yeah,
I don't know if you said you listened to the podcast with Jim Webb on it, and first of all, and so then you went to a battalion, and then you started to work up.
Yeah.
And all that. Yeah. Jim Webb went from that school to Vietnam, and they brought him out in the field and dropped him off and said, there's your platoon over there. The guy you're replacing is no longer with us, and you're going to go take over that battalion. And he walked up on the side of a hill and said, hey, how you doing? I'm Lieutenant Webb. And here's what we're going to do. And then that night they got in a big firefight, and he called in, combined arms, and man, but that school must be an awesome school.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. And by the time we were there, we had really phenomenal leaders and instructors who were able to teach us because they were fresh off the battlefield in Iraq, and were able to teach us exactly what we were going to do. And so for me, I went into a long workup prior to deploying, but some of our guys were just like what happened to Jim Webb.
No kidding.
They had maybe a month, or were meeting their platoon at their final exercise as they're stepping off to go to Iraq. And so
that's no joke right there.
It was pretty interesting. And so for me, I ended up going to a new battalion that was standing up, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, The Walking Dead, and had about a year roughly to work with my platoon and to train before we ended up deploying to Iraq.
And that was just a standard ground pounder infantry platoon?
Initially, yes. Yeah, and so we were a standard rifle platoon, and then about 2 months before deployment, based on the needs of the situation in Ramadi, where we were deploying to, the decision was made to actually break us down into smaller training teams and advisory teams. And so my platoon of roughly 40 Marines and sailors turned into 2 12-man teams, which I was in charge of one, and my platoon sergeant was in charge of another one. And so the reason they did that was because that was roughly the minimum size required to partner with effectively for these police stations. And so at that time, due to the successes of people like yourself and the other people that had fought in Ramadi and turned the tide of the battle, we were consolidating and basically withdrawing a lot of the combat power. And so we took over for 2 different infantry battalions and another Army unit with just 1 infantry battalion. So we had the entire AO, area of operations, for just 1 battalion. And so I had initially 1 police station that I was partnered with, as a young lieutenant in a 12-man team. We partnered with an Iraqi colonel and over 800 Iraqi police.
Whereabouts were you?
So we were in a small neighborhood just south of Camp Ramadi called Tamim.
Okay, Tamim, yeah.
And so all of Tamim, we were managing with the police there because the police had done such a good job and taken over that we were in the back seat almost totally.
Just to give everyone this is 2008, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
2008.
The major fighting kind of tapered off in 07. I mean, early 07. It was pretty calm. I know the guys that relieved us, by the time they left, it was very calm in Ramadi. Obviously there's still always going to be a threat, but like Tamim, when we were there was really bad, big, gnarly IEDs in Tamim when we were there, and it was awful. Some of those Humvees would get hit, and it would just be, they'd lose 3, 4, 5 guys at a shot. It was horrible, but that's awesome, and I always trying to explain to people that in Ramadi we actually won, and you're proof of that when you were over there, and you guys were, I'm sure, doing out civil affairs and that type of thing. Is that basically what you were doing?
Yeah, we were just trying to turn it over to the police there, and so got to sit on the weekly shuros and the council meetings and hang out and drink tea with the colonel, and we try to do operations with them and everything, but they locked the place down. I mean, literally by the time we were there, they had triple strain concertina wire and checkpoints all around the entire city, so they were controlling the flow they prevented the flow of any enemy material or any fighters. So then they did such a good job that honestly, I don't think anybody shot at us the entire deployment. We had a few different smaller IEDs here and there. We had one major incident with a vehicle-borne IED that killed a lot of our Iraqi policemen, unfortunately. But none of our Americans were involved or had gotten injured at that time. But they were very well trained fighting force, and they did good work.
How was it setting the expectations for your 19-year-old Marines that were on deployment with you, that were expecting to go get some?
Yeah, that was interesting. So you gotta deal with the missions that you're given, right? And so the average 19-year-old Lance Corporal or 18-year-old Lance Corporal at that time, signed up to join to go fight. And that wasn't our mission. And so we were very cognizant of that. And over the year, the workup, we were well educated too. So we had direct comms with the teams we were turning over classified email network and those sorts of things, and we're able to find out exactly what we'd be going into. And so we were able to manage those expectations appropriately.
Yeah.
And because of that, we were successful, I think. Our teams performed well. They're obviously frustrated at times,
Yeah. No, I would have guys ask me that, guys, once I was back, but I was still in, but guys would say, how am I supposed to get guys fired up to do this mission when it's all we're going to be doing is drinking tea? And, I'd say, listen, that's still your mission, and you have to do it to the best of your ability and get the Iraqi police trained up as best you can. And you still have to just attack it with everything you've got, regardless of what that mission is. And that's, hey man, that's what the nation is calling on you to do, is that right there. And so go do it to the best of your ability. And that's, again, that's why I asked you that question, because believe me, you get these young kids, man, they don't want to have tea with anybody.
No, they just want to shoot their saw. Right? Yeah. And we're pretty fortunate, and we did do some interesting things as well. So because we had access and placement within the neighborhood, Tamim was kind of a pretty tightly, packed urban area, and a lot of people would come and go. And so at that time, we had great intelligence networks that were able to help us identify if somebody didn't belong, and we were able to work with our counterparts to try to intervene before they were able to cause any issues. And so we mounted up for a few different raids, which kept the guys motivated and things. But it's kind of a good and bad thing, right? That there was no fight going on in that regards. Good in the sense that the guys are safe and came back and were able to have a successful deployment and still do something really meaningful for the country, but not as exciting as they would have wanted, because that's what the 18-year-old signs up to join to go do. Volunteers to do.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think too many guys walk in that recruiter's office thinking about police actions or anything like that.
No,
but but you have to set their expectations correctly, and it sounds like you were able to do that. Now, when you came home from that deployment, you deployed again, but it was even more on the humanitarian side. So what was that like? Well, tell us about that one.
That was tough too. So before I had actually deployed again, when I came back, I had such a good experience and learned about MARSOC at that time, the Marine Special Operations Command, that did selection in between those two deployments.
Oh, okay.
And was selected. And so at that time, the criteria to get into MARSOC was you had to do 2 deployments. And so had to go back and train and then deploy again.
So wait, is selection like buds for MARSOC? Is that what it is?
Kind of. We follow more of a Green Beret Army model. So it's modeled very, very similarly to the Special Forces assessment selection process.
Oh, so how long is the training?
It's about 6 weeks. And so you go there and you do, the basic tasks associated with selection, including, hiking a lot and land nav and psychological screenings.
So is it more of like a weeding out, or are they actually training you for anything?
There's I wouldn't say there's really much of training. It's a lot of critical thinking and problem solving, and very similar to the SFAS as far as here's problem set, ethical problem set, physical problem set, teamwork, and you're continually being evaluated. But that's just a basic evaluation to just get the shot at going to our training course. And so then we have a 7-month long.
Okay, I got it. So this first thing that you go through is just selection to see if you're going to be able to go through the real course.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Buds doesn't do that. You just show up there, and that's one of the reasons the attrition rate's so high. Maybe if we had them and actually, I take that back. Now they do have like a pre. You go to like a pre-Buds, and you get prepared for it and all that. But so you go to that selection and you get picked up. So you go through that thing and they pick you up, but then you haven't done 2 deployments. They go, no, you still got to go on deployment again.
Yeah.
And that deployment ends up being a humanitarian deployment.
For the most part, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we did what was called the Marine Expeditionary Unit. And so on the Marine Expeditionary Unit, there are Marines embarked aboard naval vessels. And so there's a battalion, infantry battalion, which they become.
I did two MU ARG deployments back in the day. So I was out there with all the boys getting after it. That's how I developed a bunch of, I have a bunch of friends that were in the Marine Corps, in recon and force recon from that time, from doing ARG deployments. So we got our shipboard time, but we used to. SEALs don't really do that too much anymore. But
no, and I think that's a good thing. It was tough. That was pretty tough. So talk about motivating your team to stay motivated through 7 months of shaking hands and drinking tea in Iraq, and now it's, hey, stay ready and just train on a ship where you have no room, you don't have any real ability to train. The gym holds 6 people, and there's 3 treadmills, and you can't get on the flight deck for 2 hours a day.
What kind of ship were you on?
So I was on the LPD 19. It was in Mesa Verde. It was nicer. It was a newer ship, so it was nice, and it was good because we were on it was a smaller ship, so we weren't on the major, the big deck
flat top
with the command deck, and so it was pretty good. And I had a great deployment because I was the company executive officer, and so I got to spend very little time on the ship, which was a lot of fun because I got to go and plan all the training. And so, we were bouncing around doing different bilateral training missions with Israel, Jordan, Oman, trained in Kuwait, had some liberty time in Qatar, Bahrain, all of the peaceful countries of the Middle East. And so it was good. It was a really good experience. But, a lot of Marines hated it because they were stuck on the ship. They didn't have the luxury that I did to go and get off the ship and train. And so it was an interesting deployment.
Yeah, those shipboard deployments are very interesting. They were like, we would do the really dumb stuff. First of all, when I was on shipboard deployments, there was no internet. There was nothing. So we would literally, and I mean, we were just dumb. And so we would watch, we had, a big box full of videotapes. Do you know what those are? Yeah.
Yes.
Video cassettes. Because there was no, streaming Netflix. So we just had I don't know, we probably watched 20 movies 5,000 times each. So that era of movies I'm very familiar with.
Okay.
But yeah, and then it was the big joke about SEALs is when you're on a ship is sleep, eat, and lift. That's what it stands for, is sleep, eat, and lift, because that's all there is to do. But we would PT every day out on the flight deck or somewhere on the ship, and then we would try and set up where we'd go shoot skeet. We brought pallets and pallets worth of skeet, so we'd go on the back, the fantail of the ship, and throw skeet and shoot it, or we'd sit out there with grenade launchers and launch grenades at the trash. So we tried to make it fun, but still, there's 24 hours in a day, and there's not a lot to do on a ship.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty boring, and and for all the listeners too, that was the reality pre 9/11, before there were all these deployments. That was, you were just, so the mission for the MEU was just to be prepared in a crisis response force, essentially. And so for us, we actually had the opportunity to do one real world mission responding to the earthquake in Haiti, which was, like you said, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And so right off the bat, as we were getting underway, that had happened a couple weeks before we were scheduled to deploy. So we got on and went down and were able to get involved and help out. And so we just flew in with the company Marines, and our company was tasked with just helping provide and establish security for a forward staging base, a logistics area, for some of the food and water that they were distributing. So
how bad was it down there?
Pretty terrible. It was really, really bad. We flew in on a helicopter into the giant dirt field, which we were bouncing sea wire and setting up fire plan sketches and everything just to get everything squared away. But the level of poverty was pretty striking for us. I mean, we had Marines standing post and standing guard and everything, and you see 4 homeless kids between the age 8 and 12 sleeping with everything they own, and they're sharing one blanket outside the wire, just hanging out. We see a fist fight, knockout, drag down fist fight between 2 girls that are age 12 and 14 over a piece of wood, because firewood is like gold there, because they just don't have wood. And so that was really, really eye-opening experience for us.
And so what were you guys doing? Were you guys bringing water? Were you bringing medical care? What were you doing?
So the UN was administering all the food and water, and so they basically dropped us off in typical Marine Corps fashion. They said, pack light, you'll only be in there for 24 hours before we relieve you. And then as we're getting on the bird, they're like, okay, it might be like 48. And by the time we land, they're like, we're not sure when you're getting out. So we ended up staying for about 9 days in, I had to beg, borrow, and steal things there. But our job was just to literally make sure that, overnight they could drop off 60 shipping trailers, ISO containers of food and water, and that people weren't going to.
Who distributed the food and water?
It was primarily the UN force there. So I think at that time it was a lot of, I think it was a primary Brazilian force. And so they would come in the mornings, load up, and go and distribute it. And I know that was different for a lot of other places, but for us that was the mission that we had, and that was the kind of the way it worked. So just a very short temporary stint, and then got back on the ships and steamed across the Atlantic.
and then hit all a bunch of exercises and whatnot, like you said, over in the Gulf.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't get to do the exercise we had planned for Israel because we were in Haiti instead. So we went straight to, I think it was Jordan, where we did Infinite Moonlight, I think, at that time. And we were able to do some basic patrolling with the Jordanian soldiers. That was kind of cool, actually, because not only is Jordan just an amazing country to be in, but those people that we were training with were some of the same units that were going to fight in Afghanistan. Okay. And so the Jordanians provided a good contingent of forces to go forward in Afghanistan. So that was fun, getting to work with those guys and to train with those guys. And then we trained with Omani soldiers, and that was pretty interesting as well. The thing we learned, which was really interesting, was actual Omanis. They have a really small population, so they have at least the units that we were working with had some conscripts from Pakistan, essentially Baluchistan, and so the officers spoke Arabic and they were Omani, but the rest of the platoon was all Baluchi and spoke Baluchi, and so it was kind of interesting to see how that worked. But very capable force, had a good time working and fighting with those guys, and so. Yeah,
modern day conscripts.
Yeah, and I mean they all volunteered. I mean they I guess technically conscript might not be the right word. They all volunteered to be there, and so we talked to another platoon sergeant. He's like, "Hey,
so it's like a way for them to make money and get a better life for themselves."
Exactly. So he's like, "Hey, the deal is I've been here for 20 years. I love doing this job. I'm able to send money home back to my family, and if I make it to 30, they'll let me bring my family over here." Huh. So he hadn't seen his family in 20 years, but he's trying to better their lot in life by going forward to live and fight for another country, which you can't fault him for that. Like that's the type of guy you want to work with.
All right, so you get home from that deployment, and now it's time to go to what's the long course of MARSOC? What's that course called?
It's called Individual Training Course, and so it is pretty similar to other Special Forces training courses. So
where is it?
It's in North Carolina, in Camp Lejeune. And so we have a small portion of the base there now where we've established a pretty sizable compound. And so I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the Marine Special Operations Command is headquartered there. And then they have a small West Coast contingent out here at Camp Pendleton. And so the entire schoolhouse is there. And that's where every operator goes through training.
And how long is that course?
It's about 7 to 8 months.
Now. And what are you doing in that course?
So that is a course that encompasses all of the basic fundamentals required to join a team and to be an operator. So we do the first phase is some physical training. You do some basic fire support, some medical training. You do your SEER, your full spectrum SEER training there. And then you move into some basic SR and patrolling, so special reconnaissance and basic, reconnaissance skills.
Are guys this isn't really a selection course then? I mean,
no, this is a training course.
But
it's pretty high stakes too, and guys are quitting or
so guys quit.
So. Yeah, plenty of guys quit.
Really?
So it's not easy. Yeah. So we kind of
the way it just seems like if someone was a Marine already and then they made it through that first course and now they show up at this course, it seems like that's a lot of hoops to jump through to get to there and then quit. That seems kind of a little bit crazy.
Yeah, well, we had some great instructors, and they pushed us hard, right? They tried to break us.
What are they doing? What is it like the same? Is it like the buds type stuff? Be cold, be wet, be tired, be miserable, no sleep. It's just to get some of that.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, kind of a mix of buds and SQT probably mixed together, and so one of the things that they were able to do within MARSOC is to try to take lessons learned and best practices from all of the other services. And so whether it was the Q course or buds or SQT or OTC or anything else, the instructors kind of looked at what was going on in other courses and looked at the requirement for Marine Raiders coming out the backside, because some of those guys will graduate, and we had guys deploy within a month or two later on hot fills out to go operate. So
do they put you through like another like crucible type scenario?
Yeah. So it kind of mix. It's called Raider Spirit, and
that sounds real fun. Yeah, that's one of those things. Like, we're gonna get you with a little bit of that Raider Spirit. Come and get some.
Yeah, and it's of varying length depending upon the class and the size and the performance. But at that point, you're trained in your amphib package, your basic small boat handling. You're trained in basic reconnaissance and those principles, all your comms and everything else. So it's basically a full mission profile for including an amphibious insert, which for us was I think like January.
Get some
maybe. And so and then same thing, limited sleep, limited water, limited food type thing. So pretty intense.
Yeah,
exercise.
It just seems like a super. The Marine Corps squared away, and this whole thing sounds like a squared away way to do this. Because if you look at buds, you don't even have real guns. Most of buds, you don't even have rifles. You're literally carrying a boat paddle. They kind of make that your weapon because you can't lose it and you can't put it down, all this stuff. But it's a boat paddle. I mean, you're just so young and untrained. Mm-hmm. You just have no skills, and so it's just, and they teach when you get to land warfare, you learn some basic diving, but the diving that you learn is just so just easy. Like, looking back on it, it's just the easiest possible things you could possibly do diving. And the same thing with the land warfare pieces. Like, they're telling you, hey, walk this far. And they're telling you exactly where to go. It's barely, you do land nav, but it's barely land nav. And it's good because, it weeds out a lot of people. But then you have to go through, like you said, SQT, which comes afterwards. And that's where you start learning, okay, this is real land nav. Okay, this is real shooting. Okay, this is, actual room entries. And then you get to a SEAL team where you go through more training. But it seems like that's why I was kind of surprised that guys that had been through enough stuff already would get to that and still be like, I don't want to do this. That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, it's a gut check. I mean, and that's one of the things that is interesting. Buds does a good job of weeding people out up front, and so you have a pretty high quality care, as far as the intangibles, the ethical and character principles. And then for us, it's kind of, I would say, more on a sustained pace.
Sustained beat down.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, we started the course with like 50 or 60 guys, and 13 of the original guys finished.
No kidding.
So that's changed a lot since then. So we've grown up a lot since then, and just like Buds has, right? Like,
oh yeah, I bet back in the day, those new MARSOC instructors were like, no one's getting through my course.
Yeah, and rightfully so. But the cool thing about it now, I see both sides of the token. But the cool thing about it now is that we want more guys. We need more guys.
Yeah.
We don't want to lower the standards.
Yeah.
So why don't we just be smarter about it, right? Like, if we do a better job of selecting guys or get more guys starting or whatever else, right? Like, if the output is a trained operator and we need these guys, then
was there any part of that training that you thought was hard?
Yeah, a lot of it was hard.
Was there anything that you were in jeopardy on, where it was
actually, yeah? So same thing, right? So Naval Academy was humbling. Being in the Marine Corps has been humbling, and at that point I was a pretty humble guy, and so I did really well throughout the majority of training, and so in the last phase,
feeling good about yourself,
I was okay, but I said, so we were doing the unconventional warfare package, very similar to very similar to what the Green Berets do with their final exercise and infoing with the G-force and everything else. And so was doing well, and then had a bad meeting where somebody thought I came off a little bit arrogant with our G-force commander and everything. And so then they just kind of, put the spotlight on me and, put me on the bubble, right? Because like you fail anything and you're done. And so, that was one of the scarier times, right? Because I had committed years of my life to be able to be doing this successfully, and then in a moment, if I can't figure out how to make this guy like me or this G-force commander, execute this mission with me, like I'm on the bubble, right? And I think, some of it's instructors messing around, but they're just testing you, right? Like, to see how do you deal with failure, right? Because if you've been successful thus far in a good number of things, let's push him beyond his limit. Let's break him and see what happens, right? And I don't know if that was exactly the case. I didn't see behind the curtain, but I survived.
I failed something called pool competency. And I failed pool competency, which is they put your dive rig on, which is an old school dive rig with an inhalation and an exhalation tube, and it's this old thing from like the 60s or 70s or something, aqua lung. And you have to do all this stuff that they tell you to do underwater, and they're slapping you around and smashing you and ripping your mask off and ripping your regulator out and all this stuff, and you have to stay calm and you have to go through all these procedures. And when I went through, it was a 30-minute evolution. And the first time I did it, my instructor, who ended up working for me in the future, he was a first class at the time, but he became a warrant officer. But he was a UDT Vietnam guy, an awesome guy. But he failed me, and so I failed, and years later I talked to him and I was like, hey, do you remember putting me through pool? He said, yeah, I was just messing with you. And I'm like, bro, you almost ruined my life. What are you talking about? You're just messing. He goes, no, I knew you'd do fine next time. Yeah. But same thing. Like, it was a test of, let's just see how this guy does. But what we did over the weekend, me and a couple buddies that had also failed, we went in the dip tank, which was just a square metal box that was filled with water. And we pool comped each other. I can't even believe we did this. It was probably the most unsafe thing I did. Or one of the top unsafe things I did was we drowned each other and trashed each other getting ready. And we did it to each other over and over again until we were like, there's no way we were going to fail. And so that's what we did. Like, there's 4 of us or something. We just spent the weekend I can't even believe they let us do that. They just gave us dive gear and said, oh, you're just going to play with the dive gear? Cool. We're in the dip tank like idiots.
Different time, right?
Yeah. But it is humbling. And it's one of those things, there's no worse feeling for me than that feeling of like, oh, if I fail this is like my whole life dream done and destroyed. So yeah, they play those games with you. Yeah. And I think they have to play those games with you, because you're going to fail in other situations once you get to the teams. You do want to see how people are going to deal with failure. And they would do things like that in BUD/S where there would be 7 people that would pass a swim, and everyone else is a failure, and they'd tell us they'd line us all up and make 100 guys sign a chit that we were loser failures on the swim, and if we fail again, we're going to be dropped from training. I don't think that was actually true. I don't know, but it didn't. Looking back at the time, I believed. At the time, I was like, "Oh my god!" Yeah. So they do a good job of that psychological warfare on you in that training.
Yeah. So that was actually before that too. That another pretty intense phase. So we did the initial CQB phase prior to that too, and so that one was the same thing. That was pretty high stakes, pretty high high stress.
Did you mess up?
No, I was okay there. Yeah, I didn't have any issues.
You didn't throw any rounds? You didn't shoot any hostages?
Nah.
I shot a hostage one time.
Oh.
Yeah, I shot just in training, but yeah, obviously just in training. But this guy, they had a target set up. Those they look like watercolor painting targets. So they're different characters, and you could take the person's hand and you could paste over like a pistol or a cell phone or a badge or a whatever. Mm-hmm. So I come into this room and it's kind of dusk, and this was back in the day, so we didn't even use night vision. This is just like day, we're just shooting with our regular eyesight. And I come in and there's a guy, and I look at his hands and I see like a dark pipe pointed at me, And I drilled this dude, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, get some. And we get done with the run, and the instructor, he comes out and he's holding the target in his hands. And he's like, hey, Jocko, look at this. And I was like, check. And he goes, what do you see? And what it was allegedly it was a rolled up newspaper that he was pointing at me. And it looked like the barrel of a gun. And I looked at the instructor and I was like, hey, bro, if I come into a room and someone's doing that, they're going to die. I'm sorry, man. You can't do that. Because the guy looks all jacked. Yeah. He's this guy with the green shirt. I'm going to find one of these and post it because I'm sure you can find him. It's the guy with the green shirt, super thick neck, and looks all hostile and aggressive. And he's pointing this pipe at me. And I drilled him. And I got in trouble. That was my, had to run a tire or something like that. Yeah. But, that was when I was in the teams. That was, hey, yeah, horrible. And you do, even though I was like, hey, I'll do that anyways, but inside, and even though I was like, man, that, you got to be better than that, and that was jacked up for me to do that, and so I had to check hands more carefully and be more patient in taking that shot to make sure what I'm looking at is what I'm looking at. So yeah, failure is a good teacher, and it's very humbling. And then. So do you guys have like a full-on graduation ceremony from that? Do you get a pin? Do you get that new Raider pin?
They do now. Yeah, we didn't have one at the time. So we've grown up. We weren't called Raiders and we didn't have a pin. So we just got a little certificate and handshake and sent on our way.
And then you went to where?
And then I was assigned to Camp Pendleton, California. So I moved out here with my wife and joined 1st Marine Raider Battalion. And
that was your first time being out at Pendleton?
Correct, yeah.
How do you like Pendleton?
I love it. It's awesome. I still live here. Didn't make it far, even though my wife's family, all her family is still in Delaware. So yeah. We love it here. Hope to never leave.
Pendleton is awesome training ground. I mean, really awesome training ground.
Yes. Yeah, it's great place to train. We did a lot of our training there, and typical places out in the desert, like Fort Irwin and a couple other places. But yeah, it's good, and it's massive. I had no idea how big it was, but just huge.
And then how long was that work up for?
So I arrived in August, and I was in the 3 shop in the operations section before I went to a team for about 2 months. And then we deployed in May, so about 9 months that I was with the team. They had done the workup cycle, I think, was probably similar to, what the SEAL teams had done, where it's, you come back, you go back, and immediately guys are shotgunned out to schools, individual training, and then come back to collective training and then deploy. So I had gotten there right when everybody was trickling back in from a lot of the individual schools that they were going to.
And then how big is the team that you take over?
We had 20 total with attachments, and so each team is about 14, or not about exactly 14. So there's a small headquarters element, and then 2 foreman elements, 2 corpsmen, medics, and then we plussed up with our intel assets and EOD, and got in country and got some dog handlers and some other stuff as well with our team. And
that when you say got in country, this is you deployed to Afghanistan.
Yes.
And now it's 2012.
Correct. Yeah, 2012. So I'd gotten out of training in 2011. And then deployed in May of 2012.
And then what was that, when you were going into that deployment, what was the atmosphere in Afghanistan at that time?
The atmosphere was different depending upon the region you were in, very, very different. So where we were going was highly kinetic. Bad guys running around all over the place, just kill or be killed, and focusing a lot on security and combat operations. And so there were 2 mission sets that our teams would perform. Either they would be doing a program called Village Stability Operations, which is what we were doing, or they would be assigned to a Commando Kandak battalion, which is more like Afghanistan's version of Ranger Regiment or anything else. And so when we deployed with a company. So we had 3 Marine teams. One of our teams took over a commando mission, and then the other 2 were doing Village Stability Operations. And then as we deployed, we took over a couple of SEAL units and a Green Beret team as well that reported to our company headquarters as well. So specifically for our team where we went, we were in very, very primitive rural area in the middle of the Helmand province, right in the green zone. And so
which green zone means something different in Afghanistan than it did in Iraq. Green zone in Iraq was an area in Baghdad, actually, that was controlled and safe and all good to go for Americans, and there was other people living there and whatnot. It was a safe zone, and the green zone in Afghanistan is not that.
No. So the green zone in Afghanistan literally is due to vegetation. And so the green zone, Afghanistan is mostly arid or desert climate, and there's very little green areas or good farmland, essentially. And I think it was in the 60s, I think it was the USAID or another international development agency built another canal off of the Helmand River. And so in between those two waterways was good farmland because farmers there would, cut out canals and everything else to grow crops. And so this was like one of the only green areas in the entire country. So that's what they mean in the Afghanistan version of the green zone. And
since there's vegetation, there's also cover and concealment for fighters, for enemy fighters.
Yeah, and so where we were, it was tough because guys would use those canals to sneak up, and it was very undulating or hilly terrain. I would consider it, and when I try to explain it to most people too, I consider it more similar to trench warfare than just desert open warfare where you can see other people. People are very able to, especially with some of the urban structures there as well. Some of the enemy fighters would be able to creep up and try to get the drop on you and get close to your position.
So so you were doing VSO, the Village Stability Operations, and what was your standard VSO mission look like? What was that deal?
So for the VSO mission, we had 3 lines of effort. So the first was to establish security, and the second was to try to revive economic development, and then the third was to link political governance. So the 3 lines of effort: security, development, and governance for political governance. Couldn't really focus on economic development or political governance if the villagers didn't have security. And so one of the first things that we did, and we took over a pretty capable force because people had been doing this mission a lot before us in this region, they would train and equip a small police force called the Afghan Local Police. And so the idea was if you take people in these small communities that are from there, train them, pay them to provide security, that they would be more effective at providing security than any Americans would be, which is in most cases very true. And so we took over this site, and we had about, I think, probably 100 or more Afghans that were on our payrolls to help go and provide security for the area. And so that was primarily what we focused on, because we were still trying to train them, get them to a place where they could provide security for themselves.
So is this multiple villages in like an area that you're providing security for, that these Afghans are providing security, or is it like one big, like larger village?
For us, it was just one village, and it wasn't even that big, honestly. So we literally, as far as operational areas and things, I think ours was a few kilometers max.
Oh,
so
no
we
kidding.
were, because
super focused.
Where we were was essentially a minefield. We were right in the middle of this contested region, prime poppy growing area. So Taliban wanted it, and the farmers would grow poppy, and that was their economic, that was their payday, their paychecks. And so very complex problem to try to change. And so
did you live in the villages? Did you live there?
Yeah.
So you took over some houses or whatever, and then you set up your base of operations, and you lived there?
Essentially, yeah. We weren't able to really take over any houses because all the houses that were unoccupied were all full of IEDs. So the TTP, and basically what we had done at that time was wherever we were going to set up, we would bulldoze and just build structures on our own, HESCO barriers. But it was very primitive. We had no running water, just living in a dust bowl, essentially. Get some towers up for security, and then that was pretty much it. So,
and there's how many of you out in this remote location?
We ended up having 2 sites, And so we had mutually supporting positions within our team, and I think we had probably 60 Americans. So we had our 20 guys, and then we actually had a trailer platoon of Army infantry guys out there as well. And so they would help provide security and stand post and allow us to go out and do missions.
So now you get into doing missions, and what does that look like? You're going out, you have to take people, you have to move people, you have to go and meet people. Like, what was the kind of standard when you say mission to execute from those little forward operating bases? What was kind of the standard mission that you would execute?
Yeah, so the missions varied, but for the most part, and I was only there for about 2 months before I'd gotten injured and came back. But the team we took over for had done a really good job, and they had some very challenging human dynamics within the AO. They were getting attacked multiple times a day. So when we got there, we tried to do whatever we could to proactively prevent that from happening. And so the standard practice that we would do is we'd go out and set ambush patrols, try to find guys who were coming to kill us and kill them before they got us. So to do that is not an insignificant task, especially when you're going through a minefield. And so the TTPs that we kind of used at that time was we would go into the cover of darkness, which would allow us time to slowly and methodically get to wherever we wanted to go, take over a compound or a building, and then just stay there all day and observe and see what happened. And then that next night, usually exfil under the cover of darkness again. And the main reason we did that was because a lot of the IEDs that were out and set up were in positions where there were just so many of them, and they were in positions that were advantageous and would be, observed by the enemy. And so if an entire compound had a few different IEDs in it, and we started to realize that, hey, we can't go in these compounds, or we can't go near them because if there's nobody in them, most of the time they have IEDs, the enemy would then wait until we were in a position and just fire a few shots at us, trying to drive us into those positions and things. And so just in general, we just preferred to operate at night because they didn't have night vision capabilities. They weren't able to shoot at us at night, and we would be able to take our time and move very slowly and methodically through the IED threat that we encountered. And so that's how we were able to try to mitigate that. And that was, how we would usually conduct those missions.
And then how often would you actually get contact once you were out set up in an ambush position?
I think almost 100% of the time. It felt like that, at least.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't go out every day. So we'd stagger these, and obviously with the operational, the number of people that we had, we're trying to maximize the bang for our buck and to be very efficient with that, while also running other operations and trying to build the police force and other types of, lines of operation. And so we'd go probably every few days.
So this is a very aggressive VSO mission.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a lot more aggressive than I was thinking.
The term that was thrown around by some of the guys was smash mouth VSO. And so if you look at the entire landscape of Afghanistan from the highest levels of command and everything, there were, green, yellow, and red areas. And if you looked at that based on enemy activity or friendliness to coalition forces, the traditional model for VSO was, hey, put them in yellow areas that, were likely to be successful.
Yeah, we can make some progress.
Not in red areas, right, where people will just fight to the death and, there's no chance of this happening. And so different people have different thoughts of what's green, yellow, and red. And so we ended up there, and that was our mission, and we tried to make the most of it. So, but yeah, very different. And so and we even had teams, other Marines were out in the west in Herat province, which was very different than the Helmand province. And so out in Herat province, guys are, walking around with just a pistol and driving on motorbikes and, drinking tea and hanging out, no helmets, not getting shot at. Very, very, very different experience than where we were. And that was great because, we're just glad different places of, different portions of the country were successful with that mission set. And I think to a large degree, most of the special operations units that conducted that mission were very successful. And for us, it's debatable how successful we were, but that was a very different environment.
Yeah, I know there were guys that were going over to do it, and they would ask me about, what do you think of this? We're going to do this village stability thing. And I was like, oh, you're going to go out in the middle of, Indian country with your platoon. That's going to be an awesome mission. Like, it's going to be great. Go get some. Go do a good job. I mean, that's just it's a cool mission. It's just to be out there on your own. I mean, how much oversight did you have out there?
Not much. I mean, and that was one of the coolest things was having the freedom to go and execute. And so, whether or not it was, destined for success based on what the situation was, we were going to do the best we could to make it success. And we had a lot of resources to do that, whether it was, the intelligence assets that we had at our disposal. As a captain in the Marine Corps, had assets that were like more than a MEU commander, right? And same thing for CAS and air support. ROE was a bit restrictive for conventional forces, and for us, we were able to, as long as we met certain criteria and able to justify it, we're able to drop CAS where we needed to, which was very different. And so we did the best we could and made the most of it.
And then you're a couple months into deployment, and that's when you got wounded.
Yeah.
And what happened on that op?
Yeah, so we were starting to have some successes with the security bubble that we were establishing. And so we pushed a little bit further from our base to try to see where we thought there would be enemy activity. And so we went about, I think, maybe a click and a half on foot from our base and found ourselves in Indian country, essentially. So we occupied a compound under the cover of darkness, and shortly after the sun rose, immediately started seeing heavy activity around us and started getting engaged from multiple directions with different weapon systems. And so shortly after that happened, there were 3 Marines on the rooftop of the compound that we're in. We had the rest of the Marines down, surrounded, protected by the rest of the compound walls. So most of the construction in Afghanistan is mud huts. And despite not having running water or electricity or anything, they were able to build these massive fortifications around each house. And so the walls would protect you, but you can't see anything. So you also don't have situational awareness on what's going on. And so as the commander, as the leader of the patrol, swapped out with Brian Jacklin, who was on the rooftop at that time, to try to get awareness. And so started observing different things going on. And as I was up there, an enemy fighter had engaged us from our flank. And so myself and another Marine on the rooftop were shot. Third Marine was able to roll off without getting shot. And so immediately a bullet went into my shoulder and into my spine. And so I just felt a pulsing sensation in my back and kind of slumped over. Saw Ricky, who was the sergeant to my left. He had been shot through the neck and was face down on the rooftop. Tried to triage myself, pick myself up, and realized that nothing below my chest was working. And so immediately got on the radio, called my guys, told them that I'd been hit and that Ricky had been hit, and they sprung into action. And so took the initiative to return fire, gain fire superiority, and triage us and continue to fight.
And how long did that last?
It was a long time.
I mean, you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and you're in a really hostile situation. How long did it take to get assets there?
Assets were pretty timely, but it was also a very chaotic situation. So at that time, we had 10 Americans out on the mission. We had 10 of our Afghan partnered force with us. And so now we're down to 8 Americans. 2 are critically wounded. We had to pull guns off the line as well to treat us, so our medic immediately started treating Ricky and I. Another Marine started treating me as well, so that leaves 6. Brian Jacklin immediately got on the radio and started to try to call in for medevac and air support. At that same moment, Murphy's Law kicked in as well, and the SATCOM antenna came down. And so our SATCOM antenna came down, so Brian was relaying through our main position all the information that was going on, and so it became pretty chaotic. And it took about, I think, 30 minutes or so before the medevac helicopters were able to come in and get us out.
Man. And how bad? What was the other guy's name that was hit? Ricky.
Yeah.
And so he got shot in the neck. Like, what was that all about?
Yeah.
I mean,
we all thought he was dead.
Yeah.
And turns out he was very, very, very lucky. So missed everything important in his neck. Missed his windpipe. Missed his spine. He was unconscious for a while, and we were both off the rooftop. And our medic started working on him, trying to bring him back to life, while another Marine was trying to keep me stable. And so put some clot and different clotting agents in his neck, and all of a sudden Rick kind of woke up and made like a zombie moan and was like, and was like blinking and stuff. And so turned out fine. And luckily today he's left the service, but he's about to graduate from college. He's into bodybuilding, and he's doing great, which is awesome. And so at that time he was pretty stable, and I started to take a little bit of a turn for the worse, because the bullet that went in my shoulder had also kind of punctured one of my lungs, and so I started to have blood pooling in my the left side of my chest cavity. And so guys were trying to get us out of there.
Were you conscious?
I was, yeah, for the most part, until towards the end, where I started to fade a little bit.
And then did you eventually did you pass out? Did they hit you with morphine? What'd they do?
I didn't get any drugs until, I don't think I got any drugs until I got on the helicopter. And then while I was on the helicopter, passed out and woke up in a hospital in Afghanistan. But I do remember the event, and so I remember making the radio call to my teammates while I was on the rooftop. I remember getting pulled down. I remember talking to Hafiz, one of the Marines who was working on me, talking him through a needle D. As he was giving me a needle D, trying to tell him and talk to him and stuff. And he said, he said some interesting things while I was there too. And
so just to give people a little bit of a visual on that, a needle decompression is when somebody's going to take a 14 gauge needle or something like that and jam it in between your ribs into your lung cavity to allow some pressure out. Then you had to talk him through that.
He knew what he was doing, but I was just trying to encourage him in different things. And so at that time I was also trying to relay information to help them find the bad guys, find who they were trying to return fire for or against. And so was trying to talk them on initially, and then after that was just trying to talk to him to make sure.
And then the helicopters set down in your compound?
No, they couldn't. So that was a big challenge. And so what happened, and what Brian Jacklin was awarded the Navy Cross for, and a lot of other guys who all risked their lives to save ours, was they had to call in the helicopters out into an open field, despite being under fire. And so they prepped the area with as much air support as they could, called in the bird, and the bird landed. Brian blew a breach in the compound wall through smoke. And then literally what he said was, if you get hit on the way to the chopper, jump in, follow me, and led the way. And without hesitation, the other guys carried us out into the open. And I'm not a small guy, I'm 200 pounds of, barrel-chested freedom fighter, just like most of us, with a lot of kit on too. And so those guys carrying us out there, we're in a poleless litter, and so to carry us, it takes 4 guys, and they can't return fire. They can't pick up their weapon and engage the enemy. So they're totally exposed, and without hesitation ran out there and doing the bullet dance, dodging bullets, trying to get us on the bird and get us out of there. And I'm alive today because of that. And so that, for me, what I tell people when I talk about this is one of the best days of my life. And so, it was one of the worst days of my life too, because I suffered this spinal cord injury and was paralyzed from the chest down for however long that may be. But it was one of the best days of my life, because a team that I was fortunate enough to lead, a team that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, displayed the highest levels of selflessness and sacrifice and courage on the battlefield. And just to witness that and to be a part of that, is something I'll never forget, and something I'll be proud of for the rest of my life. So
Yeah, and if in case anyone missed it, the opening for this was actually those are Gunnery Sergeant Jacqueline's words that he gave during a speech, and I thought they were just awesome words. So I figured I'd share them with some people, and obviously the rest of the guys, a bunch of kick-ass guys that, like you said, I mean, just incredible heroism across the board from your team. You now. And by the way, and Jacqueline mentioned this in his speech as well. There were some SEALs, like you said. I guess it was the guys that were under you, the guys from SEAL Team 3 that came in, and I actually talked to one of those guys today because I knew, because you were coming on, and I just I talked to him. It was Dan Crenshaw, and I just told him, I said, hey, I'm talking to Derek today, and he's like, oh, that's awesome, and it was just cool. It was just cool to hear the praise coming from Jacqueline, and that's exactly the same thing that Dan Crenshaw said. He's like, yeah, those guys were awesome. I mean, that's just he I said, oh, I go, you were on that mission, right? And he goes, oh yeah, he goes, those guys were awesome. That's what he said, and it was cool to hear Jacqueline saying the same thing. And a lot of times people get, I guess people get caught up in whatever it is, inter-service rivalry, and I actually literally have zero of that. Especially after my deployment to Ramadi, I have zero inter-service rivalry of any kind. Like, if you're on the battlefield and you have an American flag on your uniform, you are my brother. And it was awesome to hear that feedback from both those guys. You wake up in a hospital, and you're you're in a hospital in Afghanistan.
Yep. Yeah, I wake up in Camp Bastion. Doctor's there, and he's like, "Hey, Captain, you got shot, and you're paralyzed, and you may never walk again." I just kind of stare at him and say, "Yeah, I know." We kind of had this awkward stare off, and I'm like, "Hey, anybody tell my wife yet?" He's like, "No." And he just kind of stares at me. I'm like, well, "Go get me a goddamn phone." And oh, okay, yeah, got it. And so brings over the phone, and I wake my wife up in the middle of the night.
So you knew immediately.
I knew that was the case. Literally the second I got shot, because I tried to pick myself up, and it's hard to understand if you've never experienced it. But if just your body is numb and nothing works, then and so like. Totally knew that was the case, and didn't know how long it would last, but I knew that was what the issue was. And so called my wife and woke her up, told her, hey, I've been shot, paralyzed, I may never walk again, and I'm coming home. And so that was a pretty tough time, and tough phone call to make, but through it all, we're just really happy that I was able to make that phone call, because a lot of guys don't get to do that. And so then moved on, got evac to Germany, spent a couple days there. They didn't do anything for my condition, just kind of waited transport back to Bethesda, where I checked in and met my wife and family, and they started to do some other surgeries to remove the bullet from my spine and some other things. And so our guys at that time too they stayed put in the compound and fought for the rest of the day. Repelled a few different enemy assaults, and then, as you mentioned, the SEAL team that had come in to be the quick reactionary force for them came in at night, and Jacqueline did the turnover with them. They came in to kind of reinforce the area and do some battle damage assessment. And then that's when Dan had gotten injured, and so the guys had gotten out, and the rest of our guys made it out that day without any further injuries. And so was in Bethesda and started my recovery process there with my wife by my side and moving forward.
And that recovery process is, I heard you say in one of your other videos that you have out there, you're just talking about the new normal. Like, okay, this is the new normal. This is what it is, and I'm going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and the doctors were pretty non-committal. So when I was there, they didn't say, you'll never walk again. They didn't say, what you can or can't do. They said, hey, you have a spinal cord injury. It's very severe. It's very, it's a big deal. But if you recover function, the research shows that it might happen in the first 2 years, most likely. And so that was good in some ways and bad in other ways. It was good because it left me the opportunity to change, to control my mindset and to say, hey, like, so what? I'm going to get up in 6 weeks and go run a marathon or whatever. The challenge with that, though, was that was good for me to get through those initial stages, but it was also naive of me to not let the reality sink in. And so, when that didn't happen in 6 weeks and I didn't walk and I wasn't gaining control or function of anything below my chest, that's when it started to get real and was really challenging for me to deal with, because I didn't, it was out of my control, the level of, the permanence of my injury.
And then what was there anything that helped you get through that transition of when you all of a sudden 6 weeks goes by and you the reality starts to hit you that made you say, okay, here's what I'm going to do?
Yeah, it was bad for about, I think probably first 4 to 6 months. And the reason why it was probably the lowest point, actually definitely the lowest point, was August 10th of 2012, so about 2 months after I got injured. I had transferred to a VA facility in Tampa, Florida, because that was a major spinal cord injury clinic. And so the military DoD side doesn't have spinal cord injury recovery. They have it all in the VA. So it was just me in the VA with my wife. We relocated there. And on that day, actually, that was the day that 3 other Marines in our company from a different team were killed in an insider attack in Sangan. And so Captain Matthew Manukian, Gunnery Sergeant Ryan Jeske, and Staff Sergeant Sky Mote were all 3 guys that weren't in my team, but they were friends of mine that were killed and weren't coming home. And so it was hard to deal with that. It was hard because I was still in the hospital. I couldn't go to any of the funerals. And then it continued to be hard after that because it just reinforced the fact that my guys were out there vulnerable and I wasn't there to lead them. And that was my job, and I felt like I was failing them every day, And so although my wife was there with me throughout this recovery process, it was lonely, Everything you do in the military is in teams. You're always, from day one in boot camp, you have a buddy for everything. And now this was the first time in the military when I'm alone. And, without any control over the outcome of what would happen to my guys. And so that was tough. That was definitely the toughest part of the recovery process. And so luckily, I was able to fly back to California and see them touch down in December. All the guys made it back safe and sound, and then that was really when I was able to start to put the pieces back together and go forward and move on with my life.
What did that look like, picking up the pieces and putting them back together? And the reason I'm asking this is just because, I'm looking at where you're at right now, and if there's anybody that could be listening that could say, okay, let me hear what he did so I can emulate that.
Yeah. The key things, there's a couple things that I did that I think are very similar to some of the stuff that you've talked about before, and one is mission and purpose. And so recovering in a hospital, sitting there by yourself, wasn't the mission that I signed up for. And so as soon as I possibly could, I was back at work. And so I was back in the ops section in January, as a future operations officer, trying to do PowerPoints and slides and all the other stuff that that officers are tasked to do. And it was great because nobody else wanted to do that stuff. So I was happy to take it on and do it. And so being around the team, providing something meaningful for them and having an impact was more important for my psyche than anything else. Other 2 things I've kind of looked at were very stoic philosophy, stoic mindset, and realizing that, some things are out of my control. But I do have control over the way I choose to react to things, the way I choose to move forward with my life, and that I have opportunities that guys like Matt, Ryan, and Sky don't have. And so for me to squander that, for me not to take advantage of every day and move forward in a way that they would be proud of is a complete waste. And so that makes it real easy to stop feeling sorry for yourself and to keep pushing and to keep doing whatever you want to do. And so those were the 2 things I think that every day, even to this day, continue to push me forward is setting out on the mission and the vision that I want to achieve and the purpose for my life, and taking advantage of every day because, it's an opportunity. I have something that every day I wake up I can go and create or do or build or make something meaningful, and to not take advantage of that is to squander an opportunity that any one of those guys would love to have. So it makes it real simple and easy for me to do.
Oh man, brother. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. That's an awesome attitude. How long did you keep working in the Marine Corps for?
I stayed for about another 2 years after that. So the Marine Corps is pretty cool. They have some programs in place for guys that are injured in the line of duty where you can stay in essentially as long as you want, as long as you keep getting promoted and keep contributing. And so for me, I didn't pursue those longer term programs because I started to find some other opportunities that I was as passionate about and wanted to pursue outside the military. And so I continued to work for about 2 years as a staff officer, working with first, the operations section as we were transitioning and trying to assign new mission sets and supporting all those different types of operational planning efforts. And I'd gone back to business school part-time to try to learn about business and to go get more education. And then I became really passionate about a new opportunity in medical technology and medical research, and thought that was where my next big impact would be. And so decided to officially retire from the military in November of 2014 and have been out since then.
And what was the new opportunity and where did that lead?
So the opportunity that arose was to start a company and try to address issues and unmet needs associated with spinal cord injury. And so I learned firsthand how many challenges and how many issues there are in addition to just being in a wheelchair that a lot of people don't see. And so everything from bowels, bladder management, sexual function, physical, training, like bone density and muscle mass. There's so many different things that are challenges that are unmet needs of the people like me and the patient population of which I'm a part of. And so the idea and the company that we started is called Spinal Singularity, and that's what we're working to solve. And so our first product, the first thing we're working on, which is in clinical studies now, is a smart catheter for bladder management. And so it allows people to push a button and empty their bladder, which is currently much more advanced and much more useful and functional than the current method of management. And so that's what we've been working on for the past few years.
Yeah. It's as I was kind of reading about the stuff that you've been working on and even on that item right there, it reminded me of when my buddy Jody Middick came down to be on the podcast, and he's a double amputee, but I would see pictures of him walking around, and he would do he did some big race up in Canada. I forget what the race was called.
The Amazing
Race. And he would do all this really, badass stuff that I would think, hey, it's all good. And when he came down here, I think it might have been the second time he came down here. It was the second time he came down here, and we hung out more because, he came down for a little bit more time and we were a little bit tighter. But first of all, I got him a hotel room, and he called me and he said, hey, I'm not going to stay at that hotel because they don't have handicap stuff there. And I was like, okay, yeah, man, cool, whatever. But in my mind, I was kind of thinking to myself, why does he need that? Because I see him walking around and he's running the damn Amazing Race, right? And so I asked him, I was like, well, later, I didn't ask him on the phone. I said, yeah, cool, whatever you want. And then later I talked to him, I was like, well, why do you need that? I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was just honestly asking. And he was like, yeah, well, at night, I take my legs off and I got to crawl around. And if I got to pull myself up on the toilet, I got to pull myself in the shower. And if there's not handles and stuff, it sucks. And so that was part one of this story. Part two was he wanted to walk around San Diego and see where I lived and go to the ocean and all this kind of stuff. And so we did that. And we had gone to the Midway aircraft carrier and walked around there, and then we walked downtown, and then we went to where I live, and we were kind of walking the beach area. And I could see he was kind of slowing down. I could see his face getting a little bit, a little bit of strain in his face. And he's like, hey man, let me sit down for a minute. And then he he'd sit down and we'd talk a little bit, and then he'd say, okay, let's go. And then he'd say, let's sit down. And finally he's like, hey man, can we just go back to your house? Like, my legs are really hurting. And like, yeah, guess what? You're putting all that pressure on their stumps, and it wears away the skin, and it's hard and it sucks. And I guess, so that's part number 2. And what these 2 things reinforce to me is, like, there's so much going on that I don't see, that because I hadn't been injured like that. There's so many things going on that like, oh, he's doing okay. It's like, yeah, he's doing okay. You're seeing him for like 2 hours, 3 hours. He's living like that 24 hours a day, and he's got all these things to contend with that haven't even remotely crossed my mind. And so when I saw straight up, the first time it ever entered my mind how you take a piss, how you would take a piss. The first time it ever entered my mind, when I was researching what your medical devices are, and I was like, how ignorant am I, to be sitting here and never even thought of that. And then that's one of all these other problems that you have to contend with on a daily basis. And it's it's a daily struggle. And, something Jim Webb brought up as well. He was talking about different types of courage. And he brought up something called daily courage. And he's talked about one of his friends that was wounded. And he's like, every day it takes him 20 minutes to get out of bed. It takes him 15 minutes to get here and, to the other side of his room. He's like, that's daily courage that he has to show. And I'm thinking to myself, yep. And, it just makes me feel like there's so much more that, you go through on a daily basis that I completely take it for granted. And so for me to sit here and talk to you and realize, how hard it is for you on a daily basis, the things you have to go through, and then to hear you say like, yeah, but I'm glad I'm here, unlike my brothers who didn't come home. Yeah, I don't think anyone has any excuses, really. None. So, yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. And, it just makes you to be that much more creative with your mindset, right? Like, you look at all the challenges, but you got to also look at the opportunities, right? So I can sprint through airports much faster than you can without gaining the stress. I got good parking most of the time, so you just got to make up time where you can, right? It takes me a little bit longer to get off the airplane, but I'll kill you on the straightaways any day. And so, you just got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
So, but it's don't have a choice.
So that was the you got your MBA is that while you were still in? You went and got your MBA, or did you get out?
No, I got out about halfway through. So I did the part-time program at UCLA. It's an executive MBA, so it's on the weekends, every other weekend. And so as I was leaving the military, so I did the first year. I was still full on active duty, and then retired shortly into the second year. Took another job at another medical device startup to get some experience, and then as soon as I graduated, started full-time working on spinal singularity in my company. And so one of the experiences too that was really cool that I had as part of that retirement, as I think about it now, was being able to use and be involved in as a user exoskeleton technology. And so there's robotic exoskeleton technology that allows paraplegics to stand and walk. And so because of a lot of generous donors and the Marine Raider Foundation, I was able to use that device and to obtain that device even before FDA approval. And so I had a really, really great setup within our battalion headquarters and our office. And so we had a physical therapist downstairs. My office was upstairs. It was fully accessible, which is not like most buildings in the military. And so I was able to use this device to stand and walk and to do therapy. And when I retired, I was able to use that device and not use my wheelchair at all, and to leave on my own 2 feet, which was a goal that I'd set for myself. And so that was great, but it still didn't address a lot of these other unmet needs that we had for the community. And so that was what inspired me to try to move forward on my own path and start my own company and build this product to solve these issues. So, so very thankful for all the donors and the foundation to help support that. And I was also very fortunate. So like you said, a lot of other people had gone before me. And so one of my classmates at the Naval Academy, a guy named Matt Lampert, got to 1st Marine Raider Battalion about 2 years before I did, because he was on the quick cycle of deployments. And in 2010, he was a bilateral amputee above the knee as I was going through the training pipeline. And so I went up and saw him in Bethesda in the hospital, and just checked in with him real briefly as he was coming back and starting his rehab. And, this is maybe a week after he'd gotten off the battlefield or less. And he says, like, so what are you going to do? And he's like, I'm going to go back. I'm like, go back to California? He's like, no, I'm going back to Afghanistan. I was like, okay, gotcha. And I'm thinking, like, man, what the hell is he going to, how's he going to do that? And sure enough, as I graduated from training, he was my company executive officer who checked me in. And then we deployed again. So when I had gotten injured and deployed, he was there as their company XO. And then after my friend Matt had gotten killed, he went down and took over his team as a bilateral amputee above the knees. And so, he had come back, he had done that, he had trodden that path. And so for me, going back and recovering, our building was accessible, it was wheelchair accessible. There was a lot of other things. And then just that example that he said as well was really helpful and inspiring for me to follow. And so, so really, really fortunate in the rehab environment, especially because of all the assets that SOCOM has. And so if I'd been in the grunts, been a totally different story for how the recovery would have gone. My entire command was super supportive of me coming back and working and doing. They said, whatever you need, whatever you want. You want to go to ops? Like, sure, let's do it. Giddy up. And so, so it's a good place to recover.
When you hear about, like, when you say broadly, like, if I was a grunt, I would have gotten that kind of support. I mean, I get that because, in the SEAL teams, we have the same thing, like people will rally around and make stuff happen. Is there any organizations that you know of that sort of support, like, the frontline soldier, Marine that gets catastrophically wounded?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different nonprofits out there. Semper Fi Fund is a big one. There's a lot of different groups that support them, and it's different. It's not that they don't have the assets. It's just the location of those assets. And so an infantry battalion has a very different operational mission and leeway than a special operations battalion. And so for all of the guys that were injured in the conventional forces, when they come back, they're immediately sent to Wounded Warrior Battalion at the hospital. Mm-hmm. And so their job is now show up to your appointments and do your rehab until you get separated from the military. Yeah. That's a very different way to recover with a bunch of other people who are injured or on their way out or whatever else versus, and without an operational purpose than what I was able to do, and I was very fortunate to do, where I went back to an operational role within the battalion, and I was one of the only injured guys, recovering around normal people because I wanted to be like that. Yeah,
I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Jake Schick, but he was on here and he told his story, and that's what it was. He was there. He was just like, his job was just to kind of recover, but you could see, and in talking to him, he would have loved to have had some kind of a higher purpose than just that, which eventually he made it for himself. He made his own organization to, help wounded vets and help suicide prevention with 22 Kill. But yeah, so I think that's a good comparison, just from hearing him tell his story about, what his recovery was like. And it was geared towards, okay, you're going to do this until you get out of the Marine Corps. I guarantee, you talk to Jake Schick for 3 minutes and you're going to realize if you could have told him, hey, we want you to do this for the Marine Corps, he would have been all over it. He would have gone and done anything, because he's a badass. But yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's, you heard me say it because you kind of reference it a little bit. I always tell guys they need to find a new mission. Whatever that new mission is, you got to find a new mission. You can't be sitting around with no mission, man. You've had a mission for whatever, 8 years, 7 years, 20 years, however long it's been. You had a mission, you had a goal, and if that goes away, you got to find a new one. And it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, pick something good, right? I mean, your mission shouldn't involve whiskey, but pick something positive and something good to move in the right direction. How is Spinal Singularity doing right now? Like, what's the status?
We're doing really well. So it's been a good 3 years. I learned a ton, and just the fact that we're still in business today is pretty amazing. Because I had zero experience, right? I had no clue what I was doing. Because I had no experience in the medical device industry, I had no network, and so the first year was a lot of faith, a lot of ups and downs, right? Just like starting any business, but especially in the medical device industry. I learned a ton, and then was fortunate enough to find people to bring in that are experienced and that I trust. And so we've raised money from investors. We've raised money from grants and non-dilutive sources. And where we're at now, we have a small team of 6 employees in San Clemente, and we're running a large clinical study across the U.S. right now. And so we have sites all over, everywhere from Minnesota to New Jersey to all over Southern California and Arizona, and those sites are actively enrolling people interested in supporting our trial.
And then so, how long does that trial need to last before it gets approval?
So the goal is to have approval internationally next year, and then hopefully by the end of the year we can have FDA approval for the product as well. We aren't 100% certain that that's happening, but that's the goal, and hopefully we can collect the data we need as quickly as possible to accomplish that. And
then do you have your next device in mind after this one goes live?
Got ideas.
You got
yeah, but I've always been like a versatile guy, not like the execution like the 100%. I'm the 0 to 90% guy, not the 90 to 100%.
Somebody else got to bring it home
guy. And so I know that. So everybody else everybody else in our team now are like the 90 to 100% guys. And so I'm trying to be more like them and not even think about it, because if this doesn't work, then, there is no business, right? Like we've put all of our, this is what we raised money to do. We can't knowingly devote a minute of time to anything else until this is successful.
So you'll get,
and then with that, then we can kind of go back to the drawing board things. But
and once it's approved here, then it's just selling it and getting it out there, and it's going into the world. And then what about the Marine Raider Foundation, which is another thing you're involved with?
Yeah. So after I was injured, I was very ignorant to the realities of the way things work and what the needs would be for me. And so a lot of nonprofits out there do all kinds of great work and different things. As a Marine Raider in this situation, without knowing anything, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was very hesitant to reach out for help to anybody. And so as these things arose, one of the guys who is an employee of the organization now, and was currently an active duty Raider at that time, was like, hey man, like we're starting this nonprofit to help guys. Like if you need anything, just say so. And so I was like, all right, cool. And so they helped pay for my wife to move out to Tampa so she could be there for my recovery, helped, get her car out there so she could drive around and help transport me around to different things. They helped us raise money for the exoskeleton because it was still not covered by insurance or the VA. It was still experimental at that time, and helped do all of these things. And so, my wife and I are eternally grateful for all the support we received from them. And so as soon as I got out of the military, that organization said, hey, do you want to be a board member? Do you want to help? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And so that was 2014. And so I've been on the board since then. And I think it was 2015, I took over as the board president. And so I've been trying to devote my spare time to help that organization. But the missions that we serve and ultimately what we do at the foundation is just to support unmet needs of the community and their families. And so the government's really good at supporting injured veterans, and they have so many different programs that help people, but every situation is unique. And so Congress isn't going to change a law to appropriate money for you to not do something that doesn't fall into the black and white letter of the law, and that's fine. But that's where we step in and are able to help people, and take the stress off of them in their times of need. So have 4 real major areas. One is support to the Marine Raiders. Another is family resiliency. Third one is tragedy assistance and survivor support. And then the last one is Raider legacy and preservation. And so obviously the Raider support and the family support are pretty broad ways to work. And they can be anything from, just anything under the sun that will help Marines and their families. Tragedy assistance and survivor support, even though we're engaged in varying levels of combat, there's still guys out there putting their lives on the line every day, and that's evidenced by recent training incident that we had about 2 years ago less than 2 years ago, in 2017, there was a C-130 crash that claimed the lives of 7 Marine Raiders. And then 2 years before that, a helicopter crash in another training mission out off the coast of Florida that took the lives of another 7 guys. And so being able to support their families and family members that had survived those incidents is a big part of the mission that we fulfill. And then Raider legacy and preservation.
Can I say one thing? You hit on this a little bit, but I'm just going to expand a little bit so people can kind of understand. When you talked about like Congress isn't going to change a law to give a family that what they need at a certain time because it's too specific or whatever, and the reality is, let's say a kid needs a new bicycle, and there's the dad can't go and get it because he's wounded, he's in the hospital. Like, that's the kind of things that the foundation can do. Go out, buy the bike, get it built, and deliver. Like little things like that really matter. And it can be bigger things too. Like you said, like moving a family, helping to pay for the movement of a family, helping to redeck, get furniture for the new apartment, whatever it is. There's no law that takes care of those situations, but these types of organizations do that. And it does have a big deal. It has a huge impact for those families that are there. And believe me, when those families are in those tough situations, these little things, to be able to not have them think about it, not have them think about, hey, the cost of a flight to fly, dad out to come and visit his son or whatever. Any of those little things, they don't seem like a big deal, but they're a huge deal when families are going through these traumatic times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Another example, when my friend Matt was killed and his family went to go pick him up at Dover, one of the last, things that his mother wanted was her whole family to fly home with him, and the government would only pay for the father and mother, I think it was. And so the other 2 brothers and some other family friends, they wanted to all be on the same plane. That was one thing that she wanted, and she didn't want anything else. She just said, hey, I want us all to be on the same plane going home while we're grieving with my son.
Yeah, no, that's.
And so instead of having to deal with that and the insanity of it, just tell her, hey, we got your flight for you. Like, get on the plane. You're good.
Perfect example.
Such a seemingly small gesture, but with a timely injection of support can have a really lifelong impact on people. And so those are some of the different experiences, and I can go on and on about different ways that we've been able to help people. But bottom line is guys are going out doing these different things, and for them to be able to go forward and to fight with a happy heart, they want to know their families are taken care of on the backside, and the community will support them. And so that's literally it. Is we just, we're a 501c3 that raises money to support the community members in their time of need.
And then the last one is legacy.
Yeah. So,
which is legit, because you guys kind of are saving the legacy of the original World War II Raiders, right?
Yes, we're trying to. And so,
can you explain how you guys adopted the name? Because it's great. It's awesome.
It's a good history. So the Marine Raiders, the World War II Marine Raiders, were one of the first special operations units formed, period. And so they were formed in World War II, and their mission was to conduct enemy deep reconnaissance, essentially, prior to invasions in the Pacific. And so these guys would mount up in rubber boats. They were the first ones to do submarine lockouts, and and some of the things that they did were just insane, even by today's standards. And so these guys were very well trained, and basically provided the lineage of who we are today. And so that group, and then other members also joined the OSS at that time, which was the precursor to the CIA. There was a lot of Marines at that unit as well, and those are the 2 kind of units that we draw our lineage from as the Marine Special Operations units today. And so these guys were disbanded in, I think, 1946 after they came back, or maybe it was even 1945 after the war. And so we've been very active in connecting with these guys. They have an association that actually Colonel Kaczynski is in charge of now. He's the president of the Marine Raider Association.
That's awesome.
Which is a social organization, not a 501c3. And so a lot of these guys are still alive today, World War II veterans. And so we get to go and meet with them and talk with them and hear these stories of these amazing missions they did and conducting, month-long patrols behind enemy lines, sabotaging the Japanese and different battles. And so these guys were very, very vocal and outspoken to different leadership within the Marine Corps as they're all, in their 90s and passing away. They said, hey, one way to honor our legacy is to have a Marine Raider, have a Marine Raider unit today. And that went over terribly with any leadership, because if you don't know, there's a pretty strong culture and brainwashing done within the Marine Corps, and it's from day one, there's only one title that matters. It's that you're a Marine. Yeah. It's 1 or a 0. You're a Marine.
You are elite.
No one is special, or everyone is special, and no one is special. You're all replaceable, but you're all special, which is the weirdest conundrum. But all of us believe it, and at the highest levels, a title of any unit, that thinks you're special, is against the entire culture. And so, since formation, since the Marine Special Operations Command was officially formed in 2006 from the Force Reconnaissance Units, overnight they became the Marine Special Operations Command. So literally changed the guidon at a ceremony, and then they're officially SOCOM assets. There was this undercurrent, this push from the lowest levels, and guys were really strongly pushing this. And so the Raider symbol, the Raider logo from World War II is a shield with the Southern Cross and a skull and a dagger in it. The dagger's not there. We have the dagger for some of our units now, just the skull and the Southern Cross. And so guys would wear patches. And patches are another thing that the Marine Corps. Patches,
I know.
Beards, anything that is not in strict adherence with the uniform policy is not tolerated. Yeah. And so, that's a quick way to get hammered, right? It's just like, you're not special. What do you think you're doing? This isn't authorized, all that kind of stuff. Whereas the Army's like, Army goes out.
Hey, bro, I'm in the SEAL teams, man.
You get more points for flair, right? Yeah. So you guys aren't as bad.
Oh, so embarrassing.
Expected to have, to look cool, right? But within the Marine Corps, it was this consistent undercurrent pushing and pushing and pushing until it was patches. And then it became tattoos. So guys would get the Raider emblem just tattooed on their chest and then not wear a skivvy shirt. So you just would see. So, you're going into your first sergeant and they're like, where's your skivvy shirt, devil dog? It's like, what skivvy shirt? I don't need a skivvy shirt. And so it wasn't official until, I think it was about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, after a decade of insurgency.
That's
from
awesome.
The units that we have a name, and I think it's directly attributed to Alvin McRaven, actually. So within SOCOM, he's a really smart guy, a phenomenal commander, obviously, and he gets marketing and branding and just the basic, title, right? Like, you've earned the title of Marine, and within the Special Operations community, you earn the title of SEAL and Green Beret. And so he said, hey, one of my last things I want to do, I want to work with the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I want you guys to get a title. Yeah. And it's
Raider. It's not even about marketing and branding. It's about heritage and unit pride. I mean, what more awesome thing than to take and keep alive that tradition from World War II of those guys in the service and the sacrifice that they had. It's badass, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. And as part of that too, there's just like everything growing up, right? Like, we're growing up as an organization, so we're new to SOCOM, so we're trying to figure out as quickly as we can. So we'd have our, military occupational specialty code. So that took a while till we had.
So
all
can
that
guys
stuff
stay in the Raiders now for their whole career?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, because initially when they started, it wasn't the case, right? Yep. It was like, we'll let SOCOM use you guys, but then we want to use you too. So every 5 years, you're coming back to the fleet, and you're going to be in an infantry company or a rifle platoon and stuff. And they were like, guys,
when I first joined the Navy, I've talked about this before. When I first joined the Navy, the Marines didn't have names on their uniforms because they didn't need them. Because your name was Lance Corporal, your name was Staff Sergeant, and that's it. It was legit. I always had a lot of respect for that. But of course, now they have them. But I always thought that. But that shows you there's like a slow, there's a slow change in the Marine Corps. I'm sure some people would say that it's not good, but yeah, it just is. It's just the Marine Corps.
Big green weenie. Yeah, here it comes again. Yeah, awesome. It's good. And so So we have an MOS. Guys can stick around. We have a name. We have a badge now. We have just like you guys have the trident. We have a war eagle. I think some of the guys are calling it, which is like a big eagle and a giant sword. And so.
Well, the cool thing the cool thing about the Marine Raiders and about the Marine Special Operations is, if you're in the Navy and you're in the SEAL teams, like, you have nothing. There's almost no crossover. There's almost no. There's 3% crossover from the U.S. Navy to a SEAL team in terms of your skills. Right? You're a guy driving a ship or working a big 16-inch gun or working on a missile technology. That's what you do in the Navy. The SEAL teams, you're in a field with a machine gun. There's zero crossover, and that's horrible. And in the Marine Corps, it's like, oh, you're an infantryman that totally, every skill is applicable. And that is such an advantage to the Marine Corps. And it's such an advantage to the Raiders because you get guys that have fundamental infantry skills when they roll in. We have to teach guys infantry skills once we've taught them sort of fundamental special operations type small unit tactics. Then we have to teach them more conventional movements. Just to get them up to speed, because you got to know those things. If you're out working with 140 Iraqi soldiers, you can't. That's not a small unit anymore. You got to think a little bit differently. So you guys have that advantage, and that's an awesome thing. I remember the guys used to kind of complain about it when I was friends with a bunch of Force Recon guys back in the day. They would always complain about going to B billets. Like, hey, I got to go, well, not a B billet, but they'd have to go back to an infantry platoon. And I would always think to myself, man, I'd go to an infantry platoon. Are you kidding me? Like, it's awesome. It's awesome. And so I think that's an advantage. So if there's any young'uns out there that are thinking about your future, think about the Marine Corps because you get that full spectrum of kind of land warfare. You get the amphibious side too, but you get the full spectrum of infantry, and that's awesome. And you don't it's hard to get that in the SEAL teams. You get it over time, but I'll tell you where I got it from. I got it from working with Marines on ARG deployments, and I got to see what a company movement looked like, and that's where I learned it from. Thank God. Because by the time I was older and in Iraq working with the Army and the Marine Corps, I kind of had at least some semblance of knowledge about it. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And one of the good things about that as well for us as an organization is we don't have street to SOF, right? There's a period of time, and so like you get to assess people, and one of the best assessments you can make for future performance is a past performance. And so if you've already got 2 to 4 years of observation in the Marine Corps, if you couldn't hack it in an infantry platoon, then you don't really deserve to try out or make it to the Special Operations Committee. But those lessons learned, you're absolutely right. It's exactly the same stuff. So if you like for all those young motivators out there that want to become a Marine or become a MARSOC, like first step is just become a Marine. Be a great Marine at whatever you do. You be in the infantry, like be great. Like be the best rifleman you could be the best mortarman, machine gunner, or whatever else. Do they take any MOS?
Yes.
Okay, so that's awesome. So you don't have to worry about what your MOS is. You won't get withheld.
No, it's becoming more and more competitive, and if you're smart, obviously, I always tell people just to go in the infantry or reconnaissance units, because if you want to be a raider and you want to go do those sorts of things, those skill sets are much more applicable, and it's better to learn them early and become a master of those as opposed to a master of admin or supply or anything else. So
what's MOS?
Military Operational Specialty?
I think so.
Occupational specialty, military. So it's like what your job is.
Oh,
You
gotcha.
can be a rifleman, you can be a machine gunner, you can be a mortarman, but you can also be a mechanic. You can be an IT guy, and you can be. There's Marines that do every job. Every job that you can have. And it's the same thing in the Army. And it's the same thing in the Navy. And so that's why it used to be in the Navy you had to have certain ratings if you were going to go in the SEAL teams.
Okay.
And so I was wondering if they did the same thing, like we only take guys from infantry.
Gotcha.
Last thing I'll ask you about, because I know we've been here for a while. You got two sons, and how's that going?
It's awesome.
How old are they?
They're awesome. They're almost 16 months old, or 16 months old.
So you're just in the full get some stage.
Yeah. My wife is awesome. So they can do a few things. So they can run, they can yell and they can throw things. So when I come home, I just know that like she's been just getting, run around, getting thrown at, like yelled at, cried, diapers, like the whole thing. So
And they're twins.
Yeah. They're giants too.
He's got a twin brother.
Nice.
They do.
Yeah, they're giants. They're huge.
Isn't there like psychological things to watch out for with twins?
Like what?
I don't know. Aren't they like hyper competitive?
Yeah, I think so. In a way. Yeah.
Let me give you one piece of advice. I'm not a twin. He's a twin. Get your kids training jiu-jitsu when they're really young, because if you have a twin brother or even a brother that's close in age, you're going to be really good at jiu-jitsu because you have a natural training partner you train with all the time. They're the same size as you. Yeah. And there's some kids out there that are just sick, and it's because they have twins. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from them, but it's a huge advantage. If you've got a twin brother, they should be grappling a lot.
I fully intend on that. So that's one thing we didn't talk about, but I love jiu-jitsu. So I got involved when I was a senior in high school. I just became like
in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
Like,
did you wrestle?
I did a little bit of wrestling, and then I played mostly football and lacrosse. And one of the guys, I was a lifeguard too, and so one of the guys that came to my pool, he was like a correctional officer and got hooked up with some guys up in Philadelphia and started training. So it was like me, him, and a couple other guys training in like a church gym, and so trained there. And then when I went to the Naval Academy, one of the things that I did too was try to start a jiu-jitsu club, a grappling club there, because it was just coming up, right? It was like 2002, 2003, 2004, and so trained, and then did boxing, did a little MMA, and had a couple fights. And then like when I graduated, became a Marine and was married, it was like put that on hold because I don't have time. But yeah, absolutely.
I'm married. I got 4 kids. I didn't put it on hold. I got after it.
I don't know, bro. You figure boxing, fighting, MMA fights. I don't know, bro. That's a lot.
I always have guys go, well, once I had kids, I got 2 kids, and then they kind of give me the look for approval from me. And my answer is, I got 4 kids.
Yeah. Get some.
Yeah, are you training anymore?
I'm not. No, I haven't. So I trained a little bit in the Marine Corps. We did some combatives and stuff, and I did all that, but just focused on trying to be a great infantry officer, and so did that. And
Yeah. I got a friend, Max. Do you know Max? Max is paralyzed. Chest down, I would say. Down, yeah. He trains.
It's awesome.
Yeah, he trains.
Has to come down and hook up with him sometime.
Yeah, his grip has gotten a lot stronger.
I can see that.
When I train him now, he's all tight.
Yeah.
His grip is super strong now. But
that's awesome.
But yeah. No, jiu-jitsu is good, and with your twin boys, it's going to be real good. Yeah, man. Look, we've been at it for a while, and man, just awesome to hear you and talk to you. Where can people find you? So where should they look? Twitter?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, the usual. Twitter, all that stuff.
Derek Herrera. Well, that's
DerekHerrera.com.
And there's 2 R's in a row in Herrera, and there's a third. So there's
Herrera.
a total of 3 R's in there. Herrera. Yeah.
C.
But only 1 in your first name, right?
Yeah, just
one in the first name.
DerekHerrera.com. And so that's a website. I haven't updated the blog in a while. I've been focused on work and just doing that. And so spinalsingularity.com has some of the other stuff we're doing, but Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff's public. I don't put anything out that's not private, and real easy to find me. So I try to answer all the emails and messages and whatever else if anybody sends me notes. So not hard to track me down.
Awesome, man. Any and MarineRaiderFoundation.org. And can people find out how to donate on there? That'll take them to
if you go to that website at the top, there's a donate button that says donate now, and that'll take you to a link. You can mail checks, you can sign up for credit card, PayPal, whatever you do. There's also some contact information too, so if you can't give financially and you want to give time, there's volunteer opportunities for different events and things. But that's a great way to get involved.
Awesome. You got any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and share my story with you. I'm not here doing this to seek the limelight for anything. I'm doing it to try to be a good ambassador of the guys that are continuing to go forth and put their lives on the line on a daily basis, who can't talk about what they do or advocate for themselves. A lot of people to thank. My wife in particular, who's been there for me every step of the way. The foundation, the Marine Raider Foundation, and all the people associated with the organization. My team, who saved my life and wouldn't be here without them. And, all the guys that are out there continue to lay it down on a daily basis.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, it's been an honor to sit here and talk to you and hear your story and what you've been through and your sacrifice, even beyond what you did in the Marine Corps, what you're still doing, building your business, and with the foundation. And most important, I think, is just to set this incredible example to this day of what it means to never surrender, of what it means to never quit, and what it means to never give up regardless of the challenge that you're facing, man. That's awesome. So I appreciate the example you set for me and for everyone. And thanks for coming on and sharing it a little bit.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
Awesome. And Derek has left the building. Obviously, awesome to have him on and hear about his story. So, Echo.
Yes.
If somebody wants to support this podcast, how can they do it?
Many ways. We will. Well, actually, hey, and I meant to kind of. I didn't want to interrupt, but you know what do you call it? The something D, the decompression.
Needle down decompression. Yeah.
I guess I should ask him that. But is that like? Can you feel that? Like when it goes in.
They're sticking a damn needle into through your rib cage and into your lungs. Yeah.
Yeah. Remember?
Do you want to see if you can feel it? No. I'll stick a needle through your chest right
good.
now.
Yeah, no. Remember that movie Three Kings when they did that? Mark Wahlberg. Yes.
No.
They did that. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Anyway. All right. You don't want to talk about that
movie.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Anyway, yes. How can we support ourselves? That's the question. First way is to stay on the path, keep working out, keep eating healthy. That's the hardest one.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Derek were talking on a side note. Like, eating healthy is kind of the hardest part about this whole staying on the path thing.
Could be, yeah.
I think because it's like then again, working out it depends on who you are. Either way, you want to stay on the path. One of those elements of the path, it's required now, is jiu-jitsu.
True.
You agree, right?
Yep.
Thought you would. Anyway, when you do jiu-jitsu, you're going to need a gi. Go to originmain.com. Get whatever gi you want. Doesn't matter the color. Well, no. Check with your instructor.
Check with your instructor.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
And check with your personal moral compass.
Yeah. Wait.
If you get a gi that's not white.
Yeah. What? So what do you mean?
Tradish.
The tradish. Like, yeah.
Pete consciously tries to, usurp my personality. Like, he won't give me a white gi. He only gives me a blue gi, a black gi, or whatever gi. He wants to try and break me out of this tradish.
Yeah.
Which he's successfully done, because now I have all different colored gis.
Yeah, there you go. But I wouldn't say that violates your moral situation. That's more of a style thing.
Okay, which violates my morals.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, a little bit, huh? Either way, yeah. So yeah, check.
But I guess I can claim a small victory, because I can be like, oh, I don't care what color it is. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, little moral victory back in my direction.
Yeah, because not like you're sitting around being like, hey, maybe I should grab a green gi.
No,
because that'd make me like that'd be awesome.
I'm just opening the package from Pete, going, oh,
yeah,
he's
cool.
sent me a blue gi.
Another gi.
Whatever.
It's dope. I'll wear it.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Pete. You're the man. Oh, so yeah, get a gi, man. Whatever color you want. After you check with the instructor and your moral compass.
Yeah.
I guess. Also, rash guards.
Biggest selling gi color is, do you know?
White.
Nope.
Black?
Yes.
Dang.
Come on, we've had this conversation. We had that conversation with Pete. Everybody wants to be a ninja. Everybody wanted to be a ninja when they were little.
Oh, I didn't know he was saying that's the most selling. I thought that was like...
Everybody wants to be a ninja.
Yeah.
And
makes sense.
The ninjas had black gis, apparently.
I don't think ninjas had gis. They had something
They had the
else.
little special shoes with the toe.
Yeah, the Tai Chi shoes. They were Tai Chi shoes.
Yeah, check.
Either way.
Rash guards.
guards
You can also get rash guards
for
no gi or for whatever kind of activity. You can get T-shirts there, and you can get supplements.
Jocko supplements.
Yeah, those supplements. Joint warfare for your joints, krill oil for your all-around
Yeah, man.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Get you in the zone. Which JP sent me a text, and he's like, "How are you still saying Dave Burke is the rep
Oh,
for discipline? He's more because JP's more disciplined. And he's on Discipline Go.
Okay, yeah, that kind of in a way opens up
the Go pill, the Discipline Go pill, and he sent a picture of some like super high speed thing. And he's like, "This is me on Discipline Go."
So JP is what he called jockeying for Discipline Go representative position.
Yeah, and he thinks Dave Burke, because Dave Burke is sort of the OG Discipline player.
Good deal, Dave.
Yeah.
He is. Well, let's face it, Dave Burke, he's going to be perfect regardless because he's such a high achiever dude from day one, So, JP's a loose cannon, so he can be the representative. Well, he can be a loose cannon. He's not a loose cannon. He can be the representative of Discipline Go because he's disciplined, but he goes.
No, I think the funny thing, you don't mean loose cannon. What you mean to say about JP is JP's fired up.
He's fired up,
And what's funny is JP doesn't need no discipline. That's why he's not the best representative, because I'm like, JP, what are you going to get more in the game? He's in the game.
Yeah. So, you need to.
So JP, we'll just give him mutual supporting assets behind the discipline. So you can get discipline. You can also get Molk, mint chocolate, peanut butter chocolate, vanilla gorilla, which is supposedly named after Leif Babin, from what I understand.
Dig it.
And the darkness. And then the Warrior Kid, Molk, strawberry and chocolate. Try those out, even if you're an adult. I hate to say it, but I was thinking about this. Have you ever, as an adult, drank a strawberry quick?
Yes.
Yes, you have. I have. Big time.
Yep.
Well, now we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because now you can get something that's literally completely healthy.
What was the one? There was that wasn't quick that they tried to skew or angle as healthy, right? That was
they couldn't do that.
Some other one, some other chocolate.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, I forget it had vitamin. Nonetheless,
they tried.
Yeah, the working milk. That's the one.
Ovaltine. Ovaltine. They might try and skew.
Yeah, that's the one.
Come on, go look at the ingredients and then compare that to milk.
Yeah.
You know what that stuff has in it? A bunch of sugar. You know what milk has in it? Milk. Direct from milk cows.
Way different, man. I dig it.
So get all that stuff from originmain.com.
Yeah. Also, if you want to represent, Jocko has a store, everybody. Christmas is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm doing. I'm going to activate. It's funny because I'm saying it like this is new thing. This is like such an old thing. A gift card. A gift card on jockostore.com. So it's like, you know how okay, your brother or whoever, your cousin is like in the game.
I don't have a brother.
Well, whatever, your cousin, whoever. And they're in the game. They want, and you say, hey, you know what? I can't pick out what I want for you from here. You just pick out what you want. Boom. There you go. Gift card. Boom. Nonetheless.
You know what? I'm leaving this completely in your hands. You know why? I don't give gifts. I don't like gifts. Yeah. Gift cards just aren't a thing for me. I've never given anyone a gift card ever.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be your deal over there on your side of the tracks.
Bro, that's exactly what I was thinking when I was making it. So I was like, fucking, this goes against kind of Jocko's thing. So you know what I'm going to do? On the gift card virtual representation, I'm going to put your face right in the middle of it. Boom. So that's what I did. So there you go. So it's kind of like, it's a gift card, but it's kind of from Jocko. Since you don't give gifts, boom. Now you do.
Okay.
There you go. Anyway, on there's some good shirts. You want to represent discipline equals freedom. Any kind of, how should I say, philosophy of the path. Some good stuff on there. Some rash guards as well. And hoodies. Tank tops. I know it's winter. I dig it. But if you're in Honolulu, Pearl Harbor, wherever, you can still represent the tank top this time of year. But a lot of good stuff on there. JockoStore.com. Deathcore stuff to the core.
Flag.
Also, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. I don't listen to Spotify. I barely know what it is, but I hear good things, and we're on there. And what?
Doesn't Spotify play like mixed tapes? Kind of. Is that the theory behind it?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Maybe
But
people-
you can get the podcast there is what
Yes,
we're
sir,
saying.
you can. Yeah.
You know,
Subscribe.
you can ask Alexa for the podcast.
Yeah. Alexa. Okay, and don't be confused with that. I think we went over this before. 'Cause some people think that it's an Alexa. It's not Alexa. That's like saying, it's not an iPhone, it's a Siri. No, Siri is the the girl inside. Alexa is the girl inside the device called Amazon Echo.
Check.
Layers. Anyway, yeah, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and leave a review if you're in the mood.
Don't forget about the Warrior Kid podcast, which I just posted a new one last week and got a lot of really cool feedback on that one. And yeah, I think once people got that one, because I don't talk about it, I don't post very much about it. But anyways,
Oh,
a
just
bunch
Warrior
of people downloaded like all of them
Yeah.
because they're cool and they're good. I believe the word is conversation starters with your children.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people said. Like, oh, I finally had the conversation that I needed to have with my kids about, well, in that case, Warrior Kid podcast number 19, about making good decisions
Yeah.
and making bad decisions, and how if you make some bad decisions along the way, you could ruin everything.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And what's interesting about that one too is I have the supreme luxury of being able to listen to all these while they happen, right? These podcasts. But on top of that, if I have a specific question for myself, I can just ask you, you know?
Yeah.
But like, even though I might already kind of know the answer, but when you deal with kids, you can't just deliver certain information the same way you would as an adult or like your friend. So I'm like, man, how do I approach this specific situation? And the way you do it in Warrior Kid is the same way like you kind of tell it to me or whatever. It's that alleviates so much stress when you need to approach your kids with this kind of stuff.
Well, one thing that everyone says is, this is what I try and tell my kids. They don't listen to me, which is
Exactly what I'm
100%
talking
right.
about.
They listen to Uncle Jake. They don't listen to me. They listen to Uncle Jake.
Yeah.
Let Uncle Jake tell them what's what.
Yeah.
Uncle Jake speaks the truth, and they accept it from Uncle Jake.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Yes, sir. Also, YouTube. If you are interested in the video version of this podcast, you want to see what Jocko looks like. You want to see what Derek looks like. You want to see what I look like if that's your thing.
If you haven't seen the 2-minute trailer for the Mikey and the Dragons book, you can get that on YouTube, which, by the way, is epic, and I don't use that term lightly.
Yeah. That's cool.
Echo sent me the for approval text with that video in it, and I watched it and I wrote back, "This is the best video I've ever seen in my entire life."
Yeah.
All caps.
Yeah. Good.
And then I went and read YouTube comments. So far, no one has said Echo is jacked because you're not in the video,
yeah.
which is supremely cool.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
no, what's cool is people are saying about a 2-minute video, a cartoon video about a kid's book. People are saying that they got tears in their eyes, that they got chills.
Yeah.
It's a legit video.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So yeah, you can get that if you go to the YouTube channel, and then while you're doing that, you can subscribe to it too, to the YouTube channel.
If you want.
Get the big, subscriptions.
Sure.
And then you can get Psychological Warfare from iTunes, Google Play, MP3, whatever. And that's me telling you to do the right thing and making you do it. So just give it a shot.
You through it. It's true. Also, when you want to vary up your workout, you want to add kettlebells to your workout, get On It Kettlebells. Go to onit.com/Jocko. Some good stuff on there. Workout stuff. A lot of good stuff on there. Good information too, by the way. So go on there, onit.com/Jocko.
Jocko white tea.
Yes.
Tastes delicious and is very good for you. And it gives you an 8,000-pound deadlift. So give that one a try. Also got some books. We got Mikey and the Dragons. Okay, update. I am printing them as fast as I can. There's a bunch of printers that are printing new copies of Mikey and the Dragons. Some of them have already been shipped. They'll be going to Amazon. We are going to be cutting it close right now. Actually, we should be good. People that are ordering, well, it's going to be cutting it close, depending on when you exactly order, whether it gets to you by Christmas or not. But the faster you order, the better chance you will have of getting it before Christmas. I apologize that I did not order enough books to be printed, and that is my fault, and I should have done better. And as Sarah Armstrong pointed out to me, she's like, oh yeah, well, you know why? you didn't order enough books because you thought, oh, well, Sarah will get a book and Andrew Paul will get a book and Iris will get a book, and then everyone posts what they got. Andrew got 20 copies. Sarah got 10 copies. Iris got 10 copies. So everyone's buying multiple copies because it's the ultimate Christmas gift for anyone between the ages of 0 and 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Anyways, Mikey and the Dragons, order it as quick as you can, and we will try and get it to you by Christmas. If not, hey, what's the next holiday after Christmas? New Year's. Okay, maybe they'll get a New Year's gift.
Yeah,
New Year's gift, and or what's after that? Easter?
Well, technically,
the Easter bunny?
Valentine's Day.
Oh, well.
Technically, hey, you said holiday.
Okay. You get Valentine's Day gift for your children, I guess.
Do
people do that?
Yeah.
And if not, just get it for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. That's a fun one. That you mentioned that video, and the goal there was to kind of try to capture what it's like reading. You know how when you read a book, it goes on in your head. You know? And so you capture what's going on in that book in your head, and how you're reading it to your kid. You kind of capture that in a little summary. That's what it was. I think it did, because that's really how I felt when I read that book to my daughter.
Yeah,
it's good.
Do you do voices when you read that book? Let me hear the King voice.
No,
come on, man.
Sorry. I'm not gonna.
You heard mine. To my son.
Well, yeah, because it really is. Brad, that's classified. So
you gotta at least just give us a to my son.
To my son.
That was awful.
Bro, I know, bro.
Oh,
you put me on the spot. It
goodness.
sounds way better when I read it to her.
Dude.
Understand that.
Wow. All of a sudden I feel like a voice actor over here compared to that one.
Yeah. Well, you kind of are.
Oh,
anyway,
gosh.
moving on. Yeah, Mike and the Dragons, awesome book. Also, Way of the Warrior Kid. 1 and 2. From Wimpy to Warrior Kid. And then Mark's Mission. That's number 1, number 2. Also important, critical books. I personally think, the one that my daughter requests me to read again and again and again is Part 2, Mark's Mission.
That's
I think she really likes Nathan. Nathan James. She likes that idea of that irritating person, because that's how kids are. They always talk and,
Wait
call
until
names.
she meets Danny Reinhardt.
Yeah.
Danny Reinhardt, book 3. I'm in the process of writing right now. 10 chapters deep. Danny Reinhardt shows up. So, yeah, she'll like Danny Reinhardt. Even though my youngest daughter, when she found out about the character Danny Reinhardt and who he was, and now she goes, Danny Reinhardt. Because the character, he's like good at everything. Yeah. That's the premise of Warrior Kid 3. There's no bully per se. There's actually a kid that's a good kid. He's good at jiu-jitsu. He's good at pull-ups. He's good at running. He's good at everything. And he's nice. And that rubs Mark the wrong way, because all of a sudden he's got someone that he's jealous of. It's hitting his ego. And what's that guy's name? His name is Danny Reinhardt. How awesome is that? So when I told my daughter that, she was like, Danny Reinhardt. And she says, what did Danny Reinhardt do today? Yeah,
but, you kind of can anticipate that your son or daughter that you're reading it to, or the person reading if they're of reading age, they're going to like Danny Reinhardt.
They are, but I don't know. They might side with Mark a little bit, because you can hear Mark's getting annoyed because Danny he does this. He'll tap someone out and say like, I must have got lucky. Yeah, he's one of those kind of guys. Or like he beats him in a running race and he's like, I was feeling pretty good today, I guess. Yeah. One of those guys, he won't take credit for anything, which is and since it already bothers Mark that he lost, he's like, "What did he say that?" Right?
Yeah, and plus we all been on the mission since before Mark could even do pull-ups. We've been with him the whole time, Yeah. And so we're feeling his pain with him. Yeah. So now this guy Danny, he hasn't felt any pain. No, forget that.
Danny's just naturally good at everything.
Yeah, screw that guy.
Yeah, so that's Danny Reinhardt, and that's going to be coming out in the spring, hopefully, if I finish it in time, but which I will. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. You can get that book too. That's another book that you can get for the holiday seasons. Let's just say that.
Agree. Yeah.
If it might kind of mess up, like jam up someone's New Year a little bit if they try and get on the path like for Christmas.
Like what, pre-New Year's resolution scenario?
Yeah. Oh, maybe they use that to kick off the New Year's resolution. They get a little deathcore.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. I think you might even say it in that book. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
No, I've said
no
it.
New Year's
no
resolution.
New Year's resolution today. Now.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, I've said that many times, and I believe it to this moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the Dismissal Freedom Field Manual. The audio version of that is not on Audible. It's an MP3 thing, iTunes, Amazon Music, Google Play. Extreme Ownership, that's the first leadership book I wrote with my brother Leif Babin. We followed that up with The Dichotomy of Leadership, which is possibly better. Anyways, you should check it out. It will teach you how to pragmatically apply the policies put forth in Extreme Ownership into your world. We also have a leadership consultant company. We solve problems through leadership. That's what we do. It's me, Leif Babin, JP Donnell, Dave Burke, Flynn Cochran, Mike Sorelli, Mike Bima. And if you want to find out about that, go to echelonfront.com. We will come out and work with your company and get your leadership aligned. Also, we got the muster in 2019. There's going to be one in Chicago. There's going to be one in Denver. And if you want to come to the muster, they've all sold out. So if you want to come, try and register early, extremeownership.com. And we have EF Overwatch, which connects Spec Ops vets and combat aviation vets with companies that need leaders, tried and tested leaders. And any of you MARSOC raiders out there that have gotten out, hit it up at efoverwatch.com and we can get you connected to a job where you will be in a leadership position in the civilian sector. Again, that's efoverwatch.com. If you want to hang with us still after this on the interwebs, first of all, Derek, like I said, he left, but Twitter, Derek Herrera, Instagram, Derek_Herrera, Facebook, Derek Herrera, DerekHerrera.com, and also the Marine Raider Foundation. Again, he talked about all the things that the Marine Raider Foundation does, and if you want to go to that, the link is marineraiderfoundation.org. And then, of course, if you want to talk with Echo and myself on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Facebook, Boha. Echo is at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And thanks to all our military personnel out there holding the line. We can do what we do because you are doing what you do, and we will never forget that. And special thanks to the Marine Raiders for your legacy of bravery that will never be forgotten. And obviously, Derek Herrera for his service, his sacrifice, and like I said, to him, the incredible example that he sets. Thanks to police and law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, correctional officers, border patrol, all first responders. Thank you for keeping us safe here at home, and the rest of you that are out there listening. I know things don't always go the way we want them to go. But I think just listening to Derek today, I think there's no doubt that that is the attitude you take. You don't focus on what is wrong. You focus on what is right. You don't focus on what you can't do. You focus on what you can do. You're thankful that you have these opportunities that so many didn't get. And you take that attitude and then you go out there and get after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.